Yeah, it's good.
Що там таке?
Здається, все. Do you need another plugin for this assets?
No, just I think just one.
У них все є переноска.
Можна переносити.
Це, що тут була, це дубова, да?
Це те, що тут було.
Да, это наше.
Може, а ну вчора положили.
Нас вообще только потрібен один на час.
Ага.
А можна одну з другу вкласти?
Та можна.
Ну, давай.
Gut, ja?
Eine Woche wieder weg. Wie lange sind Sie jetzt hier?
Seit Ende August.
Ende August. Und was dazu?
Ja, es war anders. Ich würde sagen,
Ja. Sie haben jetzt hier studiert, ne? Ganz normal.
3 Monate.
Aber da würde ich gerne mit Ihnen, das soll ich jetzt hier machen, aber so
Später
dann. Wir überlegen jetzt noch ein zweites.
Ja. Ja, aber hier geht es ja erst mit
Ja. Jetzt dann, genau. Das ist doch
ja, ich musste das nicht.
Sie kommen dann nach Jena zu?
Im April.
Vielleicht schaffen wir es heute zwischendurch nochmal. Ich weiß nicht, Sie sind nicht da. Also das sollte man hier Zeit finden.
Ja,
Oder wir jetzt
ja.
gerade planen, die Zeit danach.
Ich verstehe es. Ja.
Einiges von Leuten zu kriegen, die halt ein bisschen tiefer geschaut haben, als der ich zwischendurch mal alles besucht habe und dann Hallo sage.
Wir haben ihn schon gebrieft. Weißt du, was er sagt?
Okay.
Jetzt gegen anders kann man das nicht austauschen.
Вже почалося.
Jedes Jahr. Dieses Jahr das erste Mal. Daher. Das ist für mich jetzt auch ein wichtiger Besuch. Also wir machen das immer so, dass einmal die zu uns kommen und einmal hier zu denen kommen. Das geht immer so hin und her. Zuletzt war der Ding ja schon vor uns gewesen.
Ja, ich erinnere mich. Das war am dem Tag, das ist
Nee, das war vorher.
Also ich meine,
ganz kurz was sagen.
ich glaube, er hat einen Schotter gehalten. Also
Genau.
Am dem Tag, als die Regierung das abgelehnt hat.
Das war vorher gewesen. Also das war ja November, ich meine, er war im Oktober da.
Ja. Ich kann mich auf jeden Fall an den Vortrag von November erinnern.
Ja,
Und
okay,
er hat
also
einen genau, aber kann man nicht glauben.
Ja, ich wollte noch mal nachher was ganz kurz dazu sagen.
Also auch die
Das war im November, ich habe Oktober genannt.
für sich ist
Ja, okay. Efter November war, glaube ich, der Tag gewesen, als das
irgendwas so mit dem November.
Ja, okay. Ja, das hat mich auch etwas gestutzt damals.
Ja, ist verständlich, weil
Gut, er hat es anders prognostiziert, dass es dann gekommen ist, weil er davon sprach, dass aus West- und Ostbereichen die alle nach Kiew kommen und es dann zur direkten Konfrontation kommt. Das hat er
so,
ja.
als Kulturen zusammen.
Genau.
Ist ja doch ein bisschen, aber ich weiß nicht, hängt ja auch viel von uns. Das konnte man das ja auch nicht vorher.
Das ist richtig. Genau. Aber der Osten ist ja stillgehalten, ist ja nicht nach Kiew gekommen. Das war ja
Aber diese Drohung, die hat ja auch so viel.
ja, das stimmt. Ach ja. Na, vielleicht haben wir nachher vielleicht noch ein paar Mittagessen ein bisschen Zeit.
Ich denke auch.
Schön. Und Sie sind jetzt schon über ein Jahr hier auch, oder?
Nee, ich bin seit Ende August.
Seit Ende August, okay. Ja, ich erinnere mich noch, als es erzählt wurde, dass Sie jetzt genau. Ja, dann haben Sie natürlich wirklich die spannendste Zeit miterlebt, praktisch.
Ja,
das war
fast.
ja wirklich toll. Das heißt toll. Also, ja, es ist eine Gnade, das miterleben zu dürfen, bei aller Schwierigkeit, die es auch
Ja,
gibt.
ja. Also ich habe auch das Gefühl, in den paar Monaten jetzt viel gelesen, gehört und irgendwie verarbeitet zu haben, jetzt zu wissen, wie in den letzten Jahren.
Ja, es ist für Biografien schon etwas, was auch hängen bleibt. Also ich merke das bei unseren ukrainischen Studenten, wie die alle auf dieses Thema jetzt voll schwenken und Russland untersuchen wollen, wie auch immer. Man merkt aber nicht nur einfach jetzt akademisch oder so, sondern jetzt persönlich ihre Lebensgeschichte sehr formt. Und ich fühle mich so ein bisschen erinnert, ich habe selber ja, für mich war so die Wiedervereinigungsphase eine ganz entscheidende. Das war, dann wurde ich gerade fertig mit dem Studium, überlegte, was ich in der Doktorarbeit machte. Und dann kam das rein und dann durfte ich 2 Jahre im Kanzleramt arbeiten, während der deutschen Einigung. Und das war natürlich dann auch ähnlich. Etwas, was mich sehr, sehr geprägt hat. Ich habe dann danach meine Doktorarbeit auch darüber geschrieben. Und genau, es hat über Jahre einfach auch mein Denken geprägt.
Ja, sicher.
Das sind dann die politischen Schocks.
Ja.
Persönliche Biografie beeinflussen. Ja, wir haben später bestimmt Zeit, das zu erzählen.
Andreas, du machst die halt hier an. Und jetzt ist einfach so eingestellt, dass du Politik zu schärfen machst. Du sitzt alles automatisch. Das heißt, wenn du zum Beispiel runtergehst, und wenn du so quasi zu Plänen zum Beispiel produzierst, dann hast du das Negativ geschärft. Also das kannst du einfach, siehst du dann hier.
Das sieht man aber auch, wenn man durchschaut.
Wenn du zum Beispiel nachmachst, dann siehst du, dass der Rest unscharf mehr oder weniger geschärft. Ich habe einmal kurz draufgeguckt für Schärfe.
Maxi? Small the pause. 6 minutes. Ist das hier was? Ja, es ist was.
This is why everything is and I try to organize myself so that I can focus now, so it doesn't run down the whole way. Before we did it together with sociology, now we do everything ourselves. And I will be responsible for qualitative methodology and we will try to have it much closer to sustainable topics. So with sociology, we were just talking about sociological topics, but now we listen directly to political topics. So this is one major reform which took a long time.
Скажи, чому ти їх не впізнаєш? Там нема рису. Я перекладаю в інфекцію. Короче, я вернул в оригинал.
Actually, we now at the beginning of
This is what I heard from
Я скільки взагалі не брав. Мені вкалувався.
Guck mal, ich hab diese
Я вернув в оригінал. Зараз нормально. І звук теж.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention for just a second? We decided out of different reasons, we have people supposed to hold keynote, welcome addresses, or in heavy traffic right now. So we decided to postpone the start of the conference to 9:30. Yeah? Thank you so much.
Дякую.
Die letzten 2 Tage vom Lesen Ja do rečі, 5 років став, я так попав. Вечором чистий сракопад.
Asking because we have good contacts. I have very good contacts in Brussels, and there could be a way. We have contacts mainly to the Versailles.
Ja, das ist sowieso gut.
They have studies on
Eigentlich eine halbe Stunde. Das ist halt der
So we start.
Läuft das?
but we have time.
Okay, das ist gut. Aber was fällt denn dann? Das ist euer
Das Internet?
dürfen wir da auch rein oder? Nee, das ist dann so.
Wie ist das? Wie heißt das jetzt?
Das ist für die.
Yes, I just didn't want to know.
Dieses Moment.
I will be yes, that's fine. Okay, let me use the rest.
Eigentlich bist du noch recht.
Nicht das Geld. Man spricht
Ich stimme, ja. Der U-Bahn-Fahrer.
Ja, aber
Ja, meistens ist diese Ja, ja, stimmt. Ja.
I'm not sure if there's a problem or not.
Ну, работа. Ja. Da wahrscheinlich erst mal.
Das offene Mikro.
Wir müssen die Übersetzer haben das, glaube ich, vorhin ausprobiert.
Das sollten wir mal ausprobieren.
Ich frage mal.
Ja, das sind
So, большой формат тупит полно. Just
You invested.
Oh, actually.
Нет, осечная точно.
She was present when she heard about the results of voting. She said, "I'm so happy."
I can imagine.
Current position, so the worst thing is that I still don't see just replace me this position now. Yes, yeah. It's not necessary to worry.
Program. It is at the entrance. You could ask this.
At the registration. Okay.
Was müssen Sie tun? Könnte hilfreich sein.
Ja, das ist
Also das Neue, was wir jetzt eingerichtet hat, ist ein Museum. Aber es läuft, es funktioniert noch nicht ganz. Ja.
Wissen noch nicht, was die gemeint haben, aus den anderen Gemeinden, das Nebenbeteiligung, das heißt, bei der Kino wird dann auch. Ja, bei den Werken, also so von jedem quasi eine Nahaufnahme. Ja, man teilt die ganze Gruppe sozusagen.
Ja, klar. Die ersten Bilder machst du wahrscheinlich, oder?
Werde ich jetzt machen, die Webmaterialien?
Achso, oder kann ich den besten schnell gucken.
Wir brauchen von den Leuten, die weiter hier.
Stimmt, sollte man auch kaufen.
Reicht das schon? Nee. Ach, nur?
Did today.
Bescheid sein. Es läuft jetzt auch parallel eine wichtige Sache zu öffentlich-rechtlichen Rundfunk. Da will ich unbedingt hin. Deswegen, ich bin hier so eine Stunde jetzt. Da gehe ich und dann komme ich war gegen 2 Uhr und bin um 6 Uhr da, bin vorbereitet, ist kein Problem. Ja, das ist schon ganz klar. Ja, stimmt. Das wird sogar besser, dann können wir mehr diskutieren. Ja. Das ist ja für mich auch die Ehre jetzt. Schön. Gut, bis dann. Ja.
Friedrich? Ja, kenne ich gar nicht. Ist der schon da? Also, oder? Anfang des Jahres der Antrag relativ lange im Vorlauf.
Jetzt kannst du mal das Internet ausprobieren.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I now please ask you to take your seats?
Das Museum, ne?
We have a
1, 2, 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, finally, welcome to our conference today. The topic, as you can see here, Ukrainian civil society after Maidan. I'm very happy that you all could make it. First of all, thanks to all participants. My name is Ante Hertel. I'm from Jena University. And let me first just use the chance to introduce you to our, so to say, operative team for this conference. You find here to my immediate left Dr. Maxime Jacoblev, who is an associate professor at the European Academy's Political Science Department. And here you find Mr. Friedrich Schiller, who is the current German coordinator of our joint master program here at the Mohyla University. We all will now introduce you to, in a very brief way, to some organizational details. I hope that you all got the program. This is we have produced for the conference. I do not want to introduce you to all the proceedings now, but what I want to say is, first of all, that we have to excuse for a few speakers who couldn't make it. So I just want to tell you who couldn't make it, that you have no wrong expectations. Currently, it seems that we will have no welcome address by the new president of the Academy, President Uni-Jena. And we are still waiting for the current Minister of Education, Mr. Kwitt, to turn up. I hope he turns up and we can have him to speak at some point. In panel 1, at the round table, there's a small change. Diana Subko will replace Adem Aliyev. We unfortunately, in panel 3, on the regional dimensions, we had two dropouts, Mr. Pikulik from Belarus, and also Mr. Meriakre from Moldova. Ms. Maria Solkina in the panel 4 will be replaced by Mr. Yakovlev. And in the last panel, unfortunately, it seems right now that Ms. Bienert couldn't take off and use her flight from Amsterdam, but we will see, maybe she got a flight in the morning. What's very important at this point is that you see this is a very comprehensive, very thick program, so we have to be very disciplined today with the times. I will lead you a little bit through the morning. The morning will be with Maxime in the afternoon. But what's very important is that the panels are set for 1 hour and 15 minutes. That means that every panelist has among 7 to 10, between 7 and 10 minutes for a short personal speech, so to say, a short presentation. Then we will have 15 to 20 minutes time for a discussion at the panel, and then we open for the last 15 minutes to the audience and to questions of the audience. Please, I really want to request you as panelists to be a little disciplined so we can hold and stick to the time schedule. And now we look forward to Mr. Szymanski-Meyer for a few seconds.
Good morning, everyone. Also from my side, a warm welcome to Kyiv. It's one who made it from abroad, everyone who came so early to us. From my side, only a few logistical remarks. So once you are coming from abroad, coming from Germany or from the European Union, will get their daily allowance and their reimbursement after the conference. The ones who arrived from Ukraine or who are coming from Kyiv will get their daily allowance and their reimbursement during the conference by my colleague Tia Schatz. Tia Schatz is a woman who registered you at the entrance, and she will go during the whole conference to you and will give you the daily allowance. Just for logistical questions, the toilets are just behind you, so you just have to take red arrows following, you have to follow the red crosses, and then you will get to the toilets. We all invite you, and we also invite all participants for lunch. The lunch today we ordered for 30 persons at Restaurant Celentano with Pasca. And we all invite you for a reception at the evening at 7 o'clock at Hotel Domus. You're all welcome, and if you have any questions, you can ask me or my dear colleague, Mr. Yakovlev. And that's everything for today. If you have any questions, you can always ask us. And first question is the translation working? Translation, is it working? Okay, it is working, so not in, okay. So, welcome everyone, and
from my side now, first of all, warm welcome. I'm really glad to see people that we meet on different conferences. It's so nice that we could all come to Kyiv and discuss it, like this very exciting topic, and thank you for coming, of course. I also like it from a side that we do it the German-Ukrainian side, because we have generously sponsored the German academic service, exchange service. That is good that we start on Ukrainian tradition, meaning never on time. So it is a positive thing about it. About interpretation and translation services, the practicalities that we have booked, our interpreter kindly agreed to translate simultaneously until lunchtime. However, should you need translation, should somebody need translation simultaneously after lunchtime, it is also possible. So it is great that we have kind of standby interpretation services also for the afternoon. One more thing I just would like to highlight is interesting that people complain it was difficult finding this building, but yesterday I personally received a whole lecture about this building from people who work here. It is actually the oldest part of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, and it's actually the room from which the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy started. This lady behind me, Skovorody, donated this building, and this is one of the oldest preserved buildings used for civil reasons, not for religious reasons. It is built in 1580, 1590, and it was donated to Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. Well, in fact, not Kyiv-Mohyla Academy in 1615, by this lady. So this building is really the oldest preserved, where basically the academy started. And I also find it very symbolic of the opportunity to use these premises for our conference. Additional practicalities that my colleagues have mentioned so far, we have one coffee break from 11 to 11:50, and with support of the we have to be on time schedule. Yes. German time. Then we have a second coffee break in the afternoon from 16 to 16:15, and also I kind of ask you to be on time. And if you have any questions like logistically, how to move around the campus, you will ask us. Or ask, we have students, we have an interesting international team of students, both Ukrainian and German, so we're registered to help you out. So you can ask them, ask if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxime. We are now proceeding with the welcome addresses, and it's my pleasure to introduce you first to my own boss, Professor Dr. Biermann from Jena University. He is holding the chair for international relations there now for already 4 years, from 2010 on. He is from the Jena side, the project director of our cooperation project with the Mohyla Academy, and also the formal organizer of the conference. Mr. Dillon, can I ask you for a short welcome address?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to look into your faces. And I think it's a very selected, a unique
opportunity to come together here at this very precious time for Ukraine, for all of us who are working on Ukraine. And I'm glad that we have a whole day to talk about what happened and where to go from here. And I would also like to thank immediately, before I forget this, the German Academic Exchange Program for giving us the money to come here, to gather here, and to exchange our views on Ukraine and the whole region. It was in May last year. It's just 1.5 years ago. I was invited to a private gathering here in Kyiv by the German ambassador. And we were talking about the upcoming association agreement. There were lots of people from, or a small group of people from civil society gathering, and we were looking at the chances. Would it be signed? Would it not be signed? Should the European Union apply its conditionality strictly? Or should it be rather relaxed? It was a very intense discussion that we had. And looking back today, I would say how different things turned out. Events unfolded in a way not at all foreseen at that time. I would say there are at least 4 developments which caught us by surprise. The first, and maybe the least surprising, Yanukovych didn't sign, which triggered all the events that followed. The second, it specifically triggered a revolution. No one expected at that time a revolution, or very few people. And this revolution of dignity was driven by civil society. And this is our topic today. It was a mobilization bottom-up in this society. And when we gather here today, we are also paying tribute to those who were dedicated, who were courageous, or who had a vision to start this. There was a third surprise, because the revolution of dignity turned out to become a new democratic beginning for Ukraine. If you want so, the second beginning after 2004. And it was a link that was a beginning that was closely linked to the European Union. If you want so, it was the moment when Ukraine took its choice for Europe, to paraphrase Muravchik. And the consequence, like the logical consequence from this point of view at least, was the ouster of the government, of a government which did everything to hinder, to slow down, or to water down the process. And unfortunate, and that is the turn the whole revolution took in the wake of secessionist conflict in Crimea and in Donbass. And this is not our topic today, but it's of course minds. There is a link between both. The fragility of taking place. It is even more fragile because of what happens right now in the eastern part of this country. And we should not forget about this. So what we see is an internationalization of this internal conflict, driven by Russian interference, as we know. And this is ongoing until today. And this is has not only become an Ukrainian conflict, but it has become a European conflict. It has become a question mark for the future of European security governance, because it questions all the things that we value. And this is not only peace, but it's all the norms that we stand for in Europe, and that we try to transfer also to countries like Ukraine. Now I have to make a small caveat, because it was a surprise, yes, we were caught by surprise, but some people did make some kind of forecast And here I would like to make tribute a little bit to what Alexander Demjanjuk said just before the signing of the association, or non-signing of the association agreement, because he was in Jena and he gave the presentation just before last year, and he said there will be a big confrontation. He said there will be a conflict, a major conflict is coming up. And we were all surprised. We said, this is kind of strange, we can't believe it. And even Ukrainian students couldn't believe it at the time. But today I'm thankful that we were as open at Jena University giving a speech and talking about this. It did not quite happen as you said. There was some difference, but still he alerted us to a very dangerous situation that might come. So here we are today. Ukraine and Europe are at a crossroads. If you want, so the eyes of Europe are on Ukraine. Will Ukraine rise up to the challenge of both, the dual challenge of both resolving its territorial conflicts in a manner that is in accordance with European norms? And will it finally transform in line with European standards? This conference will focus on the latter, on the Europeanization and democratization of Ukraine. And this conference has three major goals. And each of these goals is highlighting a different perception or dimension of the challenge ahead. The first goal of this conference is to look at the dimension of Ukrainian domestic politics. This is kind of a stock-taking enterprise. Where does Ukrainian civil society stand after the Maidan? There is obviously some change, there is mobilization, but how much is there? Do we really know? So this is very important for myself also to find out where we stand. What is the potential for the democratization and Europeanization of Ukraine, and also for good governance here? The second perspective is more the regional perspective. It's the dimension of the Eastern Partnership. It is contextualizing Ukraine, putting it into context. How is Ukraine, how is the development here perceived in the neighboring countries, especially in Belarus and in Moldova? What is there some kind of spillover? Or is this completely separate? How is it perceived in these countries? Is it simply different? We are different. We can't draw any parallels. Or is there commonality? And how much networking is there between the countries? This is also kind of stock-taking, but on a regional dimension. And the third dimension of perspective is the international one. If you want, so the West European one, mainly. This is the role of the outside actors, of the external actors who try to be beneficial, if you want so, for what happens here. So what is the potential and what are the limits of external support? And if we talk about external support, we first have to know the needs. What are really the needs here? What are the current needs after Maidan, which might be completely different, or in part different from the needs that were there before? So these three dimensions we want to tackle: domestic politics, regional perspective, international embedment, if you want so. And the structure and the conference is structured accordingly. We have three themes, and each theme is corresponding to one of those dimensions. And in each theme, we have two panels. This morning, we will start with the first theme, and in the afternoon, we have the second and the third theme. Now, we have gathered a great number of real experts on the whole region, on these topics. And I think this is a real chance, and we should use this chance, really to exchange views on where we stand and where we go. And these experts, also for our Ukrainian friends, they deeply identify with your country. They have followed closely what is happening in this country. And I would say they have suffered with you. Because we know Ukraine is also suffering at this point of time. Yeah. And I would like to transmit the signal that your suffering is also our suffering. So I wish you all an inspiring and stimulating start of this conference and the conference overall. And I hope that this conference will really move us a small step forward in our joint endeavor to help Ukraine democratize and Europeanize. And this is what we hope to accomplish today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Biermann, for this very comprehensive introduction, which gave us already a good overview, I think, of what we want to achieve today. It's my pleasure now to introduce you to a colleague of mine and a friend of mine, who is not only the head of the political science department of the Mohyla Academy, but also the pendant to Professor Biermann in our cooperation project, the director from the Ukrainian side of the German-Ukrainian master program here in Mohyla. Thanks for coming, and thanks for the presentation. Yeah, of course. I hope you all use the opportunity to have translation if you don't speak Ukrainian. Okay.
Шановні колеги, я дуже радий вітати всіх на нашій конференції. Я прекрасно розумію, що ця конференція не перша на теми революції гідності громадянського суспільства і не остання, оскільки все, що відбулося, значною мірою змінило наші уявлення про політичну систему України, про суспільство України, про політичні системи і суспільства багатьох інших країн. Оскільки ця подія без перебільшення, цей останній рік без перебільшення став значною мірою поворотним пунктом взагалі в історії людства, в історії Європи та всього світу. Теорія ймовірності каже, що та подія, яка відбулася, вона мала ймовірність одиницю. Тобто те, що сталося, воно мусило статися. Так, Революція Гідності. І це означає, що українське суспільство було готовим до такого перебігу подій, до такої поведінки. І що зумовило готовність українського суспільства до таких рішучих протестів, до такого вияву своєї сили, своєї гідності, свого прагнення до кращого життя. Безумовно, внутрішні сили, внутрішні резерви були дуже важливими, але не менш важливою була підтримка ззовні. Ми спостерігаємо протягом останніх, принаймні, 20 років вплив так званий soft power з боку європейських країн, з боку інших розвинених країн світу. І можу сказати, що серед тих країн, які спричиняють найбільший вплив на розвиток, на демократизацію українського суспільства, слід назвати в першу чергу Федеративну Республіку Німеччину. Країну, яка присвячує дуже серйозні зусилля, віддає дуже серйозні ресурси, і матеріальні, і ідейні, і інтелектуальні, для того, щоб допомогти Україні в її шляху до демократичного майбутнього, до розвитку економічного, культурного, політичного. І я страшенно гордий і пишаюся тим, що у нас в університеті, на нашій кафедрі, була створена перша спільна українсько-німецька програма, яка зараз набирає обертів. Можу сказати, що динаміка кількості студентів на цій програмі позитивна. У всякому разі, в цьому році ми маємо вдвічі збільшення кількості студентів, які навчаються на цій програмі. Але не лише навчанням обмежується наша співпраця, наше спілкування. Ми все більше входимо в значно тісніші контакти, наукові, адміністративні, просто дружні. Я зараз бачу тут багато облич тих людей, з ким я спілкувався і по роботі, і просто по-дружньому, і в науковому сенсі, і в побутових просто бесідах. І ось цей позитивний заряд, який привнесла наша програма, який став можливим завдяки в першу чергу підтримці німецької організації академічних обмінів ДАД, і який зараз ми відчуваємо цей вплив і відчуваємо подальші стимули для розвитку нашої співпраці. Вони були далеко не останніми в тому, що нинішнє суспільство українське зараз переосмислює себе. Події, які відбулися, і які відбуваються, власне, Революція Гідності не закінчилася, ми всі бачимо, поставила дуже серйозні питання перед політичною наукою. Виявилося, що загальноприйняті уявлення про політичну систему, про політиків, про політичні еліти та й про державу загалом, ці уявлення вже не відповідають дійсності. І, скажімо, українські події показали, що зараз політологам потрібно шукати нові підходи, будувати нові теорії, шукати нових пояснень того, що відбулося, що відбувається і чого ми можемо очікувати в недалекому майбутньому. Тому я впевнений, що найближчим часом співпраця між нашим університетом і університетом імені Фрідріха Шиллера буде розвиватися і включати в себе нові перспективи, нові підходи, нові акції. Отже, я зичу всім плідної, хорошої праці. Я впевнений, що обмін думками, який відбудеться тут на цій конференції, він буде всім і корисним, і цікавим. І загалом якраз в такому обміні і народжуються нові політичні, нові наукові ідеї, народжується нове знання, нове розуміння. Ну і дякую всім за увагу і зичу всім хорошої, плідної конференції. Дякую.
Thank you, Alexander Petrovich. I now have the pleasure to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Ms. Katja Smagli. I think you all know Katja, but I will nevertheless shortly introduce her. We got to know each other during the time she worked for the European Endowment for Democracy. The structure, kind of the new structure still, we will also discuss a little bit about today, I guess. She but also worked for the anti-crisis humanitarian program for the International Renaissance Foundation, for the US Embassy in Kyiv, as a liaison officer to the Rada. She's also doing academic work. She holds a PhD from the Central European University in Budapest, an LLM from Reading University, and of course everyone is connected in one or the other way to the Mohyla Academy. She holds a bachelor degree also from the Mohyla Academy. She recently published a book called Everyone is a Social Change Maker, Everyone Can Be a Change Maker, excuse me, Social Entrepreneurship and Strategic Philanthropy. And we also have to congratulate Katja because she was just announced the new director of the Kennedy Institute here in Kyiv. Katja, I'm very glad that you agreed to hold this little keynote address for us. And you have the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrei, for your very kind introduction. So, dear friends and dear colleagues, it is indeed a great honor for me to speak at the Ukrainian Civil Society after the Euro-Maidan conference. Much has been said and written already about the revolution of dignity, and I hope that our conference will add fresh insights to those debates. 1 year that have passed since Euro-Maidan is probably too short a time for a well-informed retrospective analysis of those dramatic events. However, the limited time span should not stop us from raising questions and sounding the alarms whenever necessary to ensure that Euro-Maidan's energy does not evaporate before the much sought-after stage of deep and sustained democracy is finally reached in Ukraine. Mr. Berman has very elegantly framed for us the issues that this conference will address. So I will not waste our time repeating those key questions. However, it is clear that the major focus of our conference is to answer the question what has happened to the Ukrainian civil society after the Euro-Maidan, what kind of new initiatives are visible, what are the challenges and vulnerabilities to the civil society, and whether the civil society today is really capable of performing all those very difficult tasks that both society and international donors put on its shoulders. All these questions are very timely, and thus we have to thank once again the German Academic Exchange Program, the Jena University, and the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy for organizing and hosting this very important and timely debate. The revolution of dignity has indeed transformed our society into a nation of proud citizens. Practically everywhere we look, from volunteer battalions to social service groups that work in the East, from anti-corruption coalition to reform advocates, from cultural animators to local community development groups, we see the growing role of civil society in Ukraine's internal developments. To paraphrase Alexis de Tocqueville, Ukrainians of all ages, all stations of life, and all types of disposition are forever forming associations. The question that needs to be answered, however, is whether all this frenzied activism presents an irreversible trend. What are the threats and vulnerabilities to the civil society today? And finally, to what extent the quantity of civic activism relates to the quality of societal transformations? The organizers asked us to have a comparative look at civil society in Ukraine before Euro-Maidan and after Euro-Maidan. And thus I want to bring to your attention the very thought-provoking policy brief that was published by Chatham House on the eve of the revolution. It was authored by Larisa Lutsevich, a Ukrainian herself, who spent a lot of time working in Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia, and who could compare and make a very interesting data-based analysis of Ukraine's civil society. So she was very concerned about the state of affairs within the sector. She argued that only 5% of citizens participated, volunteered their time, or made donations to NGOs. More importantly, Western-founded NGOs formed what she called the NGOcracy, whose leaders were more comfortable networking with Western embassies and various state agencies than holding town hall consultations and engaging with citizens. What happened at Euro-Maidan may prove many conclusions reached by Larisa Lutsevich wrong. In fact, how could we explain such an outburst of human activism in a situation of ineffective and devitalized NGOs? Many observers say that voluntary activism at the Euro-Maidan, no matter how spontaneous, could not occur without the already existing networks of organized civil society organizations. In other words, Euro-Maidan would not be possible without the vast array of long-established NGOs whose activities had a multiplier effect and translated into a cumulative effort of various long-registered groups. However, even hard data which is available today demonstrates that organized civil society groups were not of primary but secondary importance for success of the revolution. The opinion poll of the Democratic Initiatives Fund, which was released during the Euro-Maidan, has demonstrated that only 3.5% of Euromaidan protesters identified themselves as members of registered civil society organizations. In other words, Euromaidan was made up of more or less spontaneously created associations, organizations and movements, united via horizontal networks, and not linked to any institutional organization that had been funded by Western donors before the Euromaidan. In other words, as I saw the situation, we had two parallel civil society groups operating at the Euromaidan. Those represented by already registered NGOs and parallel unregistered groups which were united by social networks via horizontal structures. Sometimes they worked together as parallel, sometimes activities interconnected, but initially we haven't seen the cracks within the civil society because we had this single enemy, we were all united against this enemy, and the cracks began to be visible immediately after the single enemy was gone. In a situation when many civil society activists started running for parliamentary seats, this jealousy, internal fractions within the civil society groups has become even more visible. In my opinion, the disunity, rivalry, and jealousy among Ukrainian civil society organizations, no matter whether they are new, old, very new, pose one of the biggest threats to the future of Ukrainian civil society at large. We still observe the lack of stable structural connections between organizations, weak links between NGOs and wider society, the absence of prospective strategies of societal transformations, lack of serious work of cultural NGOs to bring the gaps between Ukraine's East and West. Those are just few problems that should be addressed during this conference. And to conclude, in fact, when we look deeper under the surface, we will discover, to a great surprise, that many of Orisa Lutsevic's conclusions resonate even today. Unfortunately, we still see that registered NGOs are not very visible, are not very well known by the Ukrainian society in large. According to the most recent opinion poll, which has been released by PACT just a few weeks ago, despite the increased mobilization of citizens through Euromaidan revolutions, citizens have limited engagement with, contribution to, and understanding of the role of civil society. Mobilization of citizens beyond emergency relief is weak, while awareness and evaluation of NGOs is very low. The most famous types of NGOs are volunteer groups and charity foundations. 45% of Ukrainians do not know a single NGO in their region. My biggest personal surprise was that Ukrainian citizens have named the NaUKMA Foundation as the most popular civil society organization in Ukraine. The focus on humanitarian work deprives civil society groups of their watchdog function. Due to humanitarian problems immediately after the Maidan, civil society almost substituted the Ministry of Social Policy in Ukraine. The need for humanitarian assistance and volunteerism in the East is really strong, but NGOs have to start a real advocacy and political work. Unfortunately, we can observe that many civic leaders are ready to close their eyes to corruption for the sake of achieving personal dividends in the political process. As one of the civic sector Euromaidan activists put it in an interview, my interview with her, it is much easier for us to bring food for the refugees or to the army, rather than control the local authorities to ensure that all those private donations are not stolen. It is much easier for us to serve as volunteers for an hour or two, rather than spending weeks on drafting anti-corruption laws and policy reforms. I believe that the old civil society should allow the new groups, those new activists that emerged during the Euromaidan, to institutionalize themselves. In my discussions with old registered NGOs, I discovered that they're very jealous of the new groups, and they literally are very concerned that if new activists successfully establish new NGOs in this country, the level of competition for funding and their access to Western donors will significantly decrease. That is why one recommendation to international donors You shouldn't be afraid of the new talent. Please be more persistent in finding it. The old guard NGOs should not be afraid to compete with the new groups for funding. Although tensions between old and new groups are unavoidable, this competition is very healthy for the sector at large, and it will push all NGOs to reform from within. We also observe the very large exodus of civil society activists into politics. I want to be very clear. I fully support the decision of prominent civil society activists to run for politics. However, their decision to become politicians poses three challenges to Ukrainian civil society. First, there is a very big threat that civil societies in general will be kidnapped and manipulated by the oligarchs. I want to leave this open now to debate, because sooner or later during our discussion we will touch on this question in greater detail. Secondly, the reputation of civil society activists may suffer if scandals at the Rada erupt. This may undermine society's trust in civil society, leading to arguments that as soon as a fresh cucumber gets into a jar of pickles, sooner or later the fresh cucumber turns into a pickle himself. Finally, we already observed a certain disappointment due to a low professionalism of civil society representatives in government. As public intellectual Andrei Portnov argued, those new Baba Paraskas, pseudo-honest journalists, commanders, specialists in national memory, and other cooks who must learn how to govern the state, they're just used as mixing ingredients to help all politicians who were directly responsible for past misdeeds to get elected to the new Rada. This is not a revolution of the Indian, and this is not an elite turnover. So, to conclude, we really have to work very hard, we really have to be smart. We really do not have to allow oligarchs to use civil society leaders to build them Potemkin villages of democracy in the Rada. My final point at this keynote speech would be about strengthening of civil society organization at the national level. Unfortunately, the hyperactivism, which is great, new organizations are sometimes very small and too inexperienced to make a difference. This large-scale activism should be followed by a stronger networking effort, by the establishment of the nationwide networks and nationally recognized civic brands. Mergers and acquisitions within the civil society organizations will only make them professionally stronger and make them more visible and effective. At this point, I would like to conclude my keynote speech, open the floor for discussions, and thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much, Katja, for this introductory keynote, which was very provocative, I think, and which gives us a lot of material, I guess, for discussion. I also have to excuse myself again. We didn't invite Irina Akhmedov. Nevertheless, we selected a wide variety of real civil society representatives with whom we will now start the panel part, the first topic of our discussion, of our conference today, called How Strong Are We? Development and Potential of Ukrainian Civil Society. And we start indeed with a roundtable of civil society representatives. Can I please ask the moderator, Irina Solomenko, to come in front? I also asked Olga Milozhnik, she's already there to join the roundtable. Alexei Kmara, Diana Zubko, Valdir Bluhan, and Stefan Gaichinov. So I hand over to Irina Solomenko by the way, developed during the organization of this conference into a kind of co-organizer. She's very knowledgeable. She is very well connected to civil society, and persons like this are unique for a successful conference program these days on the Ukrainian civil society. So thank you very much, and I'm happy also that you're free to take over this moderation.
Thank you very much, and compliments. So we'll have a panel which is less an academic panel, it will be more a practical panel. So we invite representatives of different civil society initiatives which are active at Maidan and continue to be active after Maidan. And I think we'll see a difference here between post-Orange Revolution and post-Euromaidan situation, because after the Orange Revolution, civil society kind of got relaxed and stopped influencing politics and doing things in such an active way as we're doing now. So it will be interesting to see how different civil society initiatives which emerged during the Maidan have transformed after the Euromaidan. And we have a mix of civil society representatives, those representing in a way old established NGOs and those new initiatives, horizontal initiatives, which Katarzyna mentioned in her keynote speech. It's my pleasure to give a floor first to Kyiv-Mohyla. He has worked for many years for an NGO called Toro, which at a certain point of time became sort of a official representative of Transparency International in Ukraine. And he was also very active at the Reform Support Initiative, Reform. It's a very known horizontal initiative which emerged from civic sector in Maidan. And OLC is also one of the people who works in the so-called Center for Support of Reforms, which is allocated in the government, in the Secretariat of the Cabinet of Ministers, and serves as a link between civil society and government in promoting reforms. So I'd like OLC to tell a little bit more about the Reform Support Initiative and also about the center and how successful it has been so far.
Thank you, Lina, for the introduction. Dear colleagues, I will speak Ukrainian, so please grab your handphones if you need translation. Ну, перш за все, ви знаєте, я надзвичайно дякую вам всім за можливість говорити з вами, друзі, говорити відверто і говорити на дуже складну тему. Громадянське суспільство і його роль не тільки в процесах після Майдану, а й його роль в розвитку України як держави. Ви знаєте, пані Катя Смоглі доволі гарно побудувала свою вступну промову, доволі провокаційна, я, напевно, продовжую її стиль. Взагалі-то дуже часто кажуть, що українське громадянське суспільство – це амеба, яка не має якоїсь конкретної форми, підлаштовується під ситуацію і тут же не може за себе стояти. А ви знаєте, що амеба – це така істота, яка є кубкою м'язів з невеликим мозком, яка часто стає жертвою впливів інших процесів. Я думаю, що ситуація дуже змінилася в 2004 році, коли громадянського суспільства вперше з'явився кістяк. А під час помаранчевої революції люди зробили революцію, привели нових політиків до влади і довірили їм цю владу. Бо подумали, що ми все вже зробили. Через 5 років ми будемо в Європі, через 10 Штати будуть їздити до нас вчитися, через 15 німці будуть їздити сюди, щоб вчити своїх студентів в Києво-Моглянки як в найкращому університеті Європи. Максимум 15 років. В принципі, з того часу пройшло поки що 10. І не дуже видно, що ви їдете до нас на навчання. Але в той час кістяк громадянського суспільства просто почав формуватися. Ми показали, що це може бути сила, яка розуміє, чого вона хоче. Але сила, яка ще не має м'язів, міцних м'язів. Революція Гідності дала нам м'язи. Ми створили бійця, який має сильний кістяк, який має треновані м'язи і який має розум. І, власне, головний висновок, який ми зробили після Революції Гідності, політиків і чиновників не можна залишати наодинці з владою. Коли вони самі вирішують, якою є влада, самі вирішують, як розвивати країну, ми змушені будемо знову починати Майдан. І тому громадянське суспільство вирішило працювати на всіх фронтах. На Східному фронті країни, в зоні АТО як солдати, на Східному фронті країни як волонтери, як ті групи, які супроводжують українську армію, як ті групи, які супроводжують вимушених переселенців зі Сходу. І українське громадянське суспільство працює як сила, яка змінює цю державу через реформи. Власне, я тут представляю коаліцію, найбільшу українську коаліцію народових організацій, в яку входять понад 300 експертів, які працюють по 22 напрямках реформ, 15 з яких вже стали таким фундаментом початку реформ. Антикорупційна, доступ до інформації, екологічні питання і інше. Все це стало можливим тільки завдяки громадянському суспільству. І коли ми зрозуміли, що ми вже є бійцями на цьому фронті, ми відчули, що нам не вистачає точок входу, місць, звідки ми можемо міняти ситуацію. І ми їх створили. Сьогодні в уряді працює така собі унікальна інституція, яка називається Центр підтримки реформ. Інституція, яка на 100% адмініструється громадськими експертами, яка є зв'язковим центром поміж міністерствами, урядовими інституціями і експертним середовищем, яке напрацьовує реформи. В цьому центрі вони ухвалюють спільні рішення по тому, як просувати реформи, які саме. І в цьому центрі дуже дискутують поміж собою, як має виглядати кожна конкретна реформа. Після чого просувають їх уже через уряд, через Верховну Раду і через інше середовище. Ви знаєте, чому я про це згадую? Сьогодні громадянське суспільство, по суті, працює альтернативним урядом. Якщо ви запитаєте нас, чи є в Україні опозиція у Раді, її там немає. Є одна політична сила, яка назвалася «Опозиційний блок». Але це партія регіонів, яка назвалася опозицією, щоб просто мати голоси у Раді. Партія регіонів – це партія, яка створила і виховала Януковича, яка російською мовою скормила його середовище, і яка сьогодні хоче і далі триматися за присоску української економіки і політики, щоб ви собі щось з цього мати. Реальна опозиція України, реально проактивна сила, яка щось робить в державі, є власне громадянське суспільство, яке просуває в тому числі реформи. Багато моїх колег тут присутні в залі за цим столом, я думаю, вони ще поділяться думками. На завершення свого спічу я просто хочу сказати дві речі, друзі. У нас немає жодної ілюзії в тому, що ця влада краще за попередню. Ми їй не довіряємо ще більше, ніж будь-якій владі, яка була до них. Але ми розуміємо, що тільки через нашу участь активну в реформах і нашу участь у змінах ці зміни можуть трапитися. Тому ми запустили своїх агентів в політику у вигляді молодих команд, які всередині каталізують процеси змін. Інколи вдало, інколи ні. Вчорашні події в парламенті показали, що молоді обличчя здатні викинути представників партії регіонів з керівництва парламенту, з керівництва ключових комітетів. Ми так само наших колег імплементуємо в міжнародні інституції, в такі середовища, в освіті і так далі, щоб просувати реформи всередині. На завершення, колеги, хочу попросити вас всіх допомагати нам всьому. Справа в тому, що нам завжди не вистачає рук, часу, мізків. Це те, що ви можете нам дати. Дякую вам.
Дякую всім. Це була коротка доповідь, тому що просила кожного панеліста зробити. I have asked each panelist to make a short introductory remarks, then I will ask some questions which will make presentations more detailed, and then we'll have a general discussion. So we'll have a chance to ask or receive more specific questions. And now it's my pleasure to give floor to Diana Zubko, who represents an initiative which is called Stronger Together. It's a civil society initiative which works in several directions, including the implementation of the association agreement. Diana will tell a little bit more about that. Thank you. I just want to mention that Diana is also a graduate of this joint program between Uni-Jena University and Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, and she has worked for many years for International Nations Foundation, Open Science Foundations in Ukraine.
Thank you, Ira, for introduction. I will continue in English and we'll try to put everything we do in just 5 minutes so that we could continue. So the initiative Stronger Together, it's actually it's longer than the Maidan started, because we actually initiated probably in September 2013, so it was even before the association agreement. The first time it was cancelled. But the current shape of the initiative just started from this October, and we saw our role in bringing together different kinds of Ukrainian society. Just first of all, the society at large, different types of it. all different groups and just disseminated the information about what is the European Union, what is the association agreement, which benefits Ukraine could get from the integration, or full or partly integration into the Union. The second component is just cooperation with business, and we try to help them and see the benefits, like the practical things where they could, and the ways how they could join this process of integration. So this is mainly based on the DCFTA part of the association agreement, and the core of this work is consultations for business, seminars for them. It's both based in Kyiv and around Ukraine. We have different partners here. We work with UCAP, we work with Edinburgh School of Economics, we work with Kyiv Economic Institute, and the next component would be the media one. So to disseminate information about the European Union for the Ukrainian public and also for the business needs, it's outreach. So we cannot do this without media. We have the strongly together the analytical component. We analyze the information of how reforms took part in different countries of Europe, first of all in Central and Eastern Europe, and we prepare the publications for Ukrainian national media and for the media in regions, telling which were the strong points and the weak points of those reforms and what actually Ukraine could be benefited from knowing it and from the integration process at large. And the last part probably would be, but this we find it also the most important one. This is like an advocacy campaign that we conduct. So we cooperate close with the new members of the parliament, those who came from civil society, first of all, also with the those politicians who specialize in the issues of cooperation in Ukraine and the European Union. Then there is a list of laws which we actually oversee, and we try to put them constantly on the agenda of the different political forces. And we do this also by inviting politicians of Central and Eastern Europe and the economists to come to Ukraine and to speak to the public, to speak to the politicians, and just to put an additional stress on these reforms, which could be conducted very soon, and it should be conducted actually urgently. In general, this is all we do, and we also encourage very much the cooperation with you and with different public initiatives as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana. And now it's my pleasure to give the floor to a prominent initiative called Maidan, which emerged during the Maidan revolution. And it was a strong wish of this initiative that 3 people presented. So it's my pleasure to give the floor to Azriha General. He's responsible for the reform of the Ministry of Interior after the Euromaidan. Then Marina Homoshilina, she's dealing with fundraising after Maidan, and Olga Karmushina, who deals with development and education. Please.
Thank you for inviting us. So first of all, I want to agree with the notion that the difference of this revolution of dignity and the Orange Revolution that we had in 2004 is that there was fully initiative and spontaneous reaction of people without any politics. And I think we can say that the day of dawn of Ukrainian civil society was 21st of November, when people just gathered near the column of independency in the center of Kyiv without any organization, call from politics, from opposition. So they networked with the help of Facebook, and they gathered. And I also recall during this first gathering there was a meeting and a few speakers from opposition. They called people to go away from this square because they wanted them back in few days on a rally organized by opposition. But people rejected, people just responded loud boo to them. There was a little bit surprise, a bad surprise for them. And people stayed till the morning, and there was 100% civil society, 100% middle class in the square. And also after Maidan is a good example of that. So we actually, we created on the 30th of November, the next morning when students were brutally beaten by real police on the center of Kyiv. And we also participated on events before this happened. And we just thought that maybe with the cars we can do much more things than without them. So we understood that, for instance, call of 10 cars is much better seen on TV than, for instance, a crowd of 10 people on the street. Then we also realized that we can use cars to block center of Kyiv in favor of Maidan, to do some logistics, to deliver wooden bars for heating and so on. But the main thing we discovered, we, how to say it, feel the painful spot on a body of Yanukovych. We realized that when we make a big rally with many cars to his house, to his compound called Uni-Jena, it's outside Kyiv, it's a huge territory, a lot of buildings, and so on. We made him crazy, and we destroyed zone of comfort of Yanukovych and his ministers because they could not feel any more safety in their homes. They understood that people could came to them and ask them to do something different. So we started to do such things. And afterwards, there was, of course, war against after Maidan. But I don't want to tell the whole story of our organization. I want to give the floor to Marina, and she can say what we are doing right now.
Okay. Thanks a lot. We do not block the governmental districts as often as we did during the winter. But we still have several, being an ad hoc NGO, not an NGO, but ad hoc civil organization. We decided after the Maidan that we need to solve other problems, as we felt the responsibility, civil responsibility in the part of the revolution. So for the last 9 months and months further, we are working on trying to beat the corruption in police, in courts, in prosecutor's office, and we have some actions or events near their offices almost every week. We write certain documents to officials to try to solve certain problems that we find out and develop. Also, as any other major organizations in Ukraine, we support peacefully the army, and we do lots of things in that, in the part of civil bodies near the Ministry of Defense and others. What else? So I will pass Ola, she will go deeper in our directions.
Well, as you know, we're an organization, we're very active. We move a lot, we're mobile. We certainly do not lack courage and determination to change the society the way we feel it needs to be changed. At the same time, we understand and realize that to sustain this type of high energy and to really make a significant contribution, we need to develop ourselves. And as Marina mentioned, now we're dealing with the Ministry of Interior, with the General Prosecutor offices. We speak with officials, and we need to at least know how to address them in a way that they will respond. And the protest is very well, and it works just fine. But we realize that as civil activists, we have the responsibility to develop ourselves professionally and to acquire certain competencies that, you know, the citizens in general and civil activists need. And even so, we have zero funding at the moment. We are completely on our own. We take the responsibility to invest in our development ourselves. And so the big thing that we're doing right now is educational program for after Maidan activists, but we invite anyone to our events. We started to involve experts from different NGOs, our friendly NGOs, who come to us and share their expertise. And I think this is the way to go for new NGOs and all established NGOs to start to cooperate in this way. Share expertise, share resources. And this way we can make our initiatives more effective and lasting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure now to give the floor to Vadim Truhan, who represents a young political party called Power of People, still every day. It's one of the political parties which grew out of civil society. And before that, I have to mention that Vadim Truhan was director of the Coordination Bureau for European Integration. The second country that Democratization before elected as a president, which was according to European integration in Ukraine. Thank you very much. We'll be very glad if you talk a little bit about solidarity.
Thank you very much, Irina. It's actually a great pleasure and honor for me to talk about new political forces, let's say, after Maidan. And when I was listening several of my friends who were talking about different experiences in civil society and so on, one episode from my career come to my mind. 2010, the day of inauguration of Mr. Yanukovych, I was in Oxford as a key speaker in one very nice round table, and I was very optimistic in that time. I thought that really Mr. Yanukovych, the party of region, came into power to conduct reforms, to really bring Ukraine closer to the EU and so on. I was naive. Very quickly after his appearance in the presidential office, everything changed in Ukraine. And actually, I myself, as a diplomat, understood that we really do not have political parties in Ukraine. They really do not have political responsibility as a phenomenon in Ukraine. Everything what we have, political projects, which normally combine of so-called marionettes of oligarchs. Those people who, using huge financial resources of certain oligarchs, come to the power to protect their interests, not to protect the interests of the country, not to propose any political program of the development of the country, not to propose any vision of ideology, how the country should develop, and so on, just to protect the interests of certain oligarchs or families. The word which actually become very popular the appearance of Mr. Yanukovych. And then, as a diplomat, I decided I do not have anything to do but to go to politics, because I cannot realize myself, I cannot do anything for my country being a diplomat. And then I understood that many people from different other professions, lawyers, journalists, IT specialists, and so on, also realize that they cannot realize themselves in their professions. And in such a way, we, through many discussions, by January 2013, created the first initiative group, which actually decided to propose to the society, to propose to the country, qualitatively new kind of political party, qualitatively new kind of politics. I'm trying to explain it in order you could understand that this is not just an initiative which was born during Maidan. That we actually have an initiative which passes through certain stages of thinking in the minds of different people, which actually we're trying to implement using examples of European parties, other civilized countries, examples, and so on. That's how we started. And now very briefly, what we are doing. Who we are actually, what we are doing. Who we are. We are the party which don't have one single leader. We are the party which doesn't have any relations with any oligarchs. We are the party which have permanent dialogue with every our ordinary members of the party. The decision-making process, of course, is not simple, because when you have one leader, you can make any decisions every time, every minute. When you have a discussion, you have to pass through certain stages. But normally, the decisions are of much higher quality. Normally, these decisions are really dedicated to the country, to the whole party, not to the one people. And last but not least, regarding who we are, we do not have all politicians. We, from the very beginning, decided that we have to have certain illustration criteria. 1 year before Maidan, we decided it for ourselves. And this illustration criteria allowed us not to have in the among our party members those people noted in corruption cases, or those people who had before chances to serve for the country, in the government or in the parliament, but they did nothing. In such a way, we managed to stay as sort of clean party, without dirty people with bad reputation. And last, what we are doing. When we were in the process of the creation of our structures, we analyzed how other political projects or parties exist in our country. And we understood one main thing, that they do not work with the society in between the elections. And we decided that we, first of all, have to work with the society all the time. Elections are just taste, like exam for the party. What party managed to achieve? And in the very beginning, it's very difficult, and nobody knows you. And these elections, which we actually decided to take part in, but have been absolutely not prepared, because we have just registered ourselves in August this year. But they demonstrated that if you do not have visibility, then you do not have any chances to be elected. We noted that 48% of people didn't appear on the polls. Why? Because they do not trust those political projects which exist. They are looking for those parties which have done something for them, but they cannot find them. And now we didn't stop our activities after elections. We just started our activities. We are working with young people, creating youth organization of our party. We are working with foreign parties of liberal ideology, because we are a liberal-oriented party. And last but not least, we are implementing different projects in education, in the sphere of protection of the rights of those internally displaced persons, in the sphere of assistance to our army in anti-terroristic operation zone, and in other projects which are really visible for and are needed for this country. Control on the activities of the government, local communities, and so on and so on. So we are just started, but we really hope that we will be successful, because we are different than those whom we have now in our politics. But we also hope that Ukraine will get several such new political parties of different ideologies, and people, society will then have a choice whom to vote for during next, hopefully, yearly elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maidan. And now our plan has been a bit Kyiv-centered so far, and now we'll move a little bit to the regions. It's my pleasure to give floor to Olga Miroshnik from Kharkiv. She will, Olga, can you please give us a brief overview of Maidan developments in Kharkiv and also post-Maidan situation? Actually, in Kharkiv is one of the cities where a lot of volunteer initiatives are concentrated, who do a lot of work with the refugees, with the army, and they will tell us about that. Thank you.
Дякую. Доброго дня. Для тих, хто не пам'ятає, де Харків, я декілька слів скажу. Харків знаходиться на сході України і всього 40 кілометрів від Росії. І не тільки 40 кілометрів від Росії, це така прикордонна зона, він ще знаходиться дуже близько до Донецька і Луганська, і тут військова така зона. Тобто ми не тільки прикордонне місто зараз, ми ще і прифронтове таке місто, велике місто, яке знаходиться найближче до військових дій. Тому в Харкові роль дійсно така дуже важлива зараз. Хоча на початку Майдану всі думали, що Харків – це російське місто, дуже багато росіян, і все буде добре, ніякого там заворушень не буде. Нагадаю, що в Харкові 1,5 мільйона жителів і 300 тисяч студентів. 300 тисяч студентів. І коли почались події на Майдані, Харків вийшов в перші ж дні, і в Харкові Майдан був дуже активний, але він був не схожий на ті Майдани, які були в Україні. Чому? Тому що у нас очолював рух Майдану дуже відомий письменник Сергій Жадан. А в Сергія дуже багато знайомих письменників, поетів і музикантів. І ось Сергій нам постійно запрошував на Майдан поетів, музикантів і так далі. У нас була Ірина Кампа, брати Капралова, Групович і так далі. І у нас такий інтелігентний Майдан, де читали вірші. І що мене вразило? Всі ці науковці, їх дуже багато, якщо 300 тисяч студентів, то, звичайно, викладачів не менше, якщо не більше. І ось нарешті ми їх почули. І почули українською мовою. Ми думали, що в Харкові взагалі ніхто не розмовляє, виявляється, знають і розмовляють. І коли підтягнулися професора науковці, стало ще веселіше. Ну, і далі, так, як часу немає, в кулуарах я можу вам розповісти, я хочу вам тільки сказати, що у нас була координаційна рада біля 40 громадських організацій, але більше всього це були просто активісти. Ми ще шуткували, що в Харкові зареєстровано 3,5 тисячі громадських організацій, але громадянського суспільства не було, ми їх не відчували. І навіть під час Майдану не стільки громадські організації, а дійсно спонтанно вийшли лідери, окремі жителі міста, і вони вийшли на Майдан. Що цікаво, найцікавіші точки такі – негатив. Неодноразово напад на лідерів був, побиття, на лікарні вони лежали, і спалили декілька машин нам, ті, які підвозили всі речі для Майдану, вони були спалені. Міліція вела себе напрочуд толерантно, вона ні в що не вмішувалась, але кожного разу стояла біля Майдану і жодної практично драки, якогось непорозуміння не було. Але що найцікавіше в Харківському Майдані? Ви пам'ятаєте, що 22 лютого втік Янукович з України. Так ось я вам хочу сказати, що втікав він з Харкова. Чому з Харкова? 22 лютого в Харкові наш одіозний мер Кернес і ще більш одіозний губернатор Добкін, вони зібрали сепаратистський з'їзд у Палаці спорту. Вони приїхали біля 3 тисяч з усієї України, представники партії регіонів, мери міст, і на цьому з'їзді сепаратистському повинні були об'явити, що Харків, Харківську Народну Республіку і Харків столицею. Але і Янукович теж приїхав і повинен бути на цьому з'їзді. Він знаходився в резиденції під Харковом. Але коли почалось це дійство, і вийшло більше 50 тисяч харків'ян, окружили весь палац спорту, ці керівники, які там були, дуже швиденько протягом години закінчили і через чорний ход втекли. А Янукович просто не прийшов, і в цей же день, як вже потім ми узнали, в цей же день з Харкова він заїхав у Межигір'я і просто втік з країни. От, ну, у нас така, скажімо, точка цікава в нашому Майдані. Що стосується після Майдану, він у нас не закінчився. Він у нас дуже такий романтичний, самоорганізуючий, працює і зараз, прямо на площі, стоїть палатка, все для перемоги. І біля цієї палатки дискусії, університети, всі ідеї, всі консультації, збір коштів, все відбувається тут. Нічого не закінчується. Самоорганізація людей просто вражає, настільки вона висока. Ще один момент, я розумію, Ірина дивиться, що вже часу в мене немає, але це дуже важливо. Ми створили станція Харків, це волонтерська організація, яка прямо в дуже красивому, дуже величезному нашому залі вокзалу створила пункт по прийому біженців. І вся координація роботи почалась там, і почали це волонтери. І МЧС потім підтягнулися, і влада, і постійно консультувалися вже з цією станцією. Наразі, щоб об'єднати всі волонтерські рухи, і щоб знати, кому потрібна допомога, а хто декілька разів отримує цю допомогу, в Харкові створена диспетчерська волонтерів, волонтерська диспетчерська, де є повністю вся база даних переселенців, а в Харкові їх 113 тисяч, це тільки зареєстрованих, а не зареєстрованих втричі більше. Тобто у нас зараз дуже багато переселенців. І все це роблять наші волонтери. Так що оптимізм є, люди патріотичні. Я просто кажу, що патріотизм зашкалює. Я такого ніколи не бачила в своєму житті. Це дуже радує. І я дуже сподіваюся, що ця наша крайня східна точка Харків, що він не підведе, і ми все-таки разом будемо будувати демократичну країну. Дякую.
Thank you very much, Olga. I would like to ask Olga Sigma, can you give us some information about whether you have access to information from the government and whether you receive feedback from the government as to whether your ideas were taken on board? Because it's easy to know what the Nation Commission of Reform is doing with the website, but we don't know much about this office and to what extent it is successful. Thank you.
Добре. Ну, взагалі-то, I will continue in Ukrainian. Ну, взагалі-то, колеги, Центр підтримки реформ, це от як він працює. Якісь експерти, люди, активісти, вони пропонують свої ідеї, хочуть щось змінити, але не знають, як саме це повинно виглядати. На першому етапі зустрічають експерти, які спільно з ними напрацьовують тексти, потім ці тексти розглядають урядовці з міністерства, в спеціальних робочих групах, а далі народжуються спільні нормативні документи, і вони або стають реформом, або не стають. Так от, ви знаєте, ми маємо таких 3 яскравих приклади, коли нам довелося блокувати урядові рішення через Центр підтримки реформ, а коли нас не стало гірше держати. Ну, по-перше, ще влітку минулого року ми заблокували таку одіозну дуже постанову про реалізацію арештованого майна Курченка і інших членів сім'ї Януковича через дуже непрозорі схеми, що дозволяло вкрасти з бюджету держави близько 100 мільйонів доларів. А звідки ми це заблокували діло, а от зараз, в листопаді, перед розпущенням нового Кабміну, такі ці схеми протягнули. І в інтересах людей, які сьогодні стали владою від партії Яценюка, на жаль, Україна втрачає 100 мільйонів доларів через цілісний ефективний схеми. Другий такий приклад це про реформу, також негативну, про реформу міліції. Справа в тім, що спочатку їх хотіли реформувати дуже безкритично, просто поміняти назву з міліції на поліція і там ввести нову форму і все. Зараз, якщо ви чули і бачили, в принципі, почалася комплексна реформа, і вона почалася саме завдяки громадянському суспільству, всяких підтримки реформ. Влада нічого не зробила для того, щоб це було по-нормальному, це виключно заслуга експертів. І є ціла листа дуже позитивних прикладів, коли, власне, ми працюючи з структурі, там маємо помітні реформи. Наприклад, Центр надання адміністративних послуг. Якщо ви знаєте, друзі, у нас зараз діє безвізовий режим, раніше починає діяти, ще не діє, безвізовий режим з Євросоюзом у випадку, якщо ми технічно до цього підготуємося, то зокрема ведемо біометричні паспорти. З нового року українці, маючи такі паспорти і пройшовши деякі технічні деталі, по ідеї з літа можуть подорожувати по Європі без шенгенських віз. Також, щоб ця послуга була надана якісно по всій Україні, необхідно створити 40 тисяч точок, де можна отримувати такі паспорти. Технічна готовність держави це мати 500 пунктів із 40 тисяч, які потрібні. Завдяки нашій роботі ми змогли децентралізувати цю послугу, надавати її через цілу купу непов'язаних з паспортною службою установ, які зможуть максимально полегшити доступ українців до цього паспорта. І відповідно зменшити корупцію в цьому. Таких прикладів є ціла купа. Але от я власне хотів пояснити, як це діло працює. На жаль, верніше, є на щастя дуже така чітка процедура, як проходить рішення, як пораза готує, як воно йде на призмін, але в житті це інколи буває зовсім по-іншому. Ми дивимося, що відбувається навколо, розуміємо, що українці в дурі, і починаємо швидко втручатися. А паралельно з цим сидимо в кабінетах, опрацюємо спільні матеріали реформ, дуже сильно сваримося. Ви навіть не уявляєте як. Доходимо до рішення, яке обидві сторони вважають компромісним, і починаємо публічно працювати. Приблизно таким чином, хоча це все називається красиво, Центр підтримки реформ при уряді, за участі громадянського суспільства і уряду. Дякую.
У нас залишилося ще 20 до закінчення панелі. Я думаю, що я не буду задавати всім глядачам запитання, я відкрию можливість дискусії, я просто ще спитаю Вадима Трухана. Чому ви вирішили не пішли шляхом, яким пішли інші, скажімо, громадські діячі чи політичні партії, Альянс із Анатолієм Гриценко, тобто старим політиком, також низка громадських діячів пішли з іншими політичними проектами, старими. Чому ви не вирішили піти цим шляхом, вирішили все-таки окремо? Цікаво просто, дякую.
Дуже гарне запитання. Ми, якщо відверто протягом цього часу створення, так як блідники перед такі, сподівалися, що вдасться об'єднатися всім тим, хто мають бачення, візію, якою треба будувати Україну, демократичною, європейською і так далі. Люди переговорять з усіма на світі. І до Майдану, і під час Майдану, і після Майдану. Знаєте, феномен України в тому, що українці не договороздатні. На жаль. Серйозно. Українці не договороздатні. І там, де є якась печатка, якесь крісло, якісь документи якоїсь партії чи організації, все. Вони готові про все домовлятися, крім того, щоб не здати голову. На жаль, так, в політиці. Я от щасливий з того, що в реанімаційному пакеті реформ вперше, те, що сьогодні говорив Олексій, вперше в Україні зібралася наскільки велика кількість, наскільки потужних, і тож вони різні, вони індивідуальні, експертів. Там дійсно страшенні дискусії, коли будуть. Я сам теж був одним з ініціаторів створення одної з груп євроінтеграційної. Один час навіть був головним експертом, але потім перестав займатися цим, бо конфлікт інтересів з політикою. Так? Я це бачу. Так от. Знаєте, біда в тому, що яка політична партія до цього моменту у нас не будувалася, на виході виходить КПРС. Так. Лідерська, хтось один фінансист, якісь групи впливу там, і так далі. Ми вирішили зламати цю негативну практику для України. Поки в нас не буде справжніх політичних партій в розумінні, як це є в Європі, в Сполучених Штатів Америки, в Південній Кореї, в інших демократичних країнах, у нас нічого доброго в країні не буде. Будуть якісь точечні зміни, але не буде ні гарантій демократичного розвитку для громадян, ні судів, які незалежні, ні незалежного парламенту, нічого. От тому, власне, не вдалося домовитися. Але я щасливий з того, що не вдалося ні з ким домовитися, тому що ми в такій ситуації можемо зберегти чистоту ідеї, яку ми з самого початку почали реалізовувати. Деякі, до речі, партії, не буду називати, щоб ніхто не компрометувати, у нас навіть вкрали наші ідеї з точки зору там статуту, програми і так далі. Але знаєте, це по тому принципу записник. Мій записник, будь-хто з вас хто возьме, його використати не зможе, тільки ясно. Так само я, чий записник не візьму, я не зможу використати, бо тільки той, кому він належить, зможе. І ці партії, до речі, вже осоромилися навіть через це. Тому, завершуючи. Ще раз повторюю одну важливу річ, що Україна, от англійською мовою, desperately needs, Україна відчайдушно потребує справжніх політичних партій, які працюють весь час з суспільством і з своїми партійцями, а не тільки створюються під вибори і потім пропадають. Як тільки в нас народиться 5-7 таких політичних партій, а от, на жаль, я поки навіть про образи таких політичних партій не назву. Я дуже сподівався, що «Самопоміч» буде такою партією, але судячи по тому, які гроші були вкладені на парламентських виборах, причому не прозорих, абсолютно та ж сама ситуація. Олігархи стоять десь ззаді і дергають за ниточками. А ті активісти, які пішли в «Самопоміч» там, чи в інші партії, я чомусь більше переконаний, що вони рано чи пізно вийдуть з них і створять іншу політичну партію. На інших принципах, аніж в тих політичних партіях, де вони є. Події в парламенті вже показують, що вони починають бунтуватися. Дуже добре, що вони пройшли зараз в парламент, а не потім. Бо якщо навіть і вони б зараз не прийшли, то там залишилося те саме болото, що було раніше. Ну, плюс трохи розбавлене там співачками, типа Огневич там і спортсменів танцювати. Дякую.
Дуже дякую всім доповідачам. Я тепер пропоную відкрити дискусію. Прошу задавати запитання, робити коментарі. Ми зробимо кілька раундів. Я зберу кілька запитань, і потім дамо можливість відповісти. Дуже прошу, значить, я бачу, хто підняв руки, прошу Наталію допомогу.
Я хотіла повернутися до того, що казала. Чудно.
Прошу представлятися, прошу так ще раз представитися, так, щоб всі почули.
Наталя Шоквалова, я представляю фундацію Фріда, це медичний центр з офісом в Мадриді, Брюсселі. Я хотіла повернутися до того, що сказала Катя на початку СМАГІ, про, скажімо так, і те, що теж є частиною дебатів в академічній літературі про розбудову або допомогу громадянському суспільству в постсоціалістичних країнах, про подібне громадянське суспільство, про старі ініціативи, ті, які є НОО або NGO по-англійськи, і нові ініціативи, які є grassroots. Навіть дівчата сказали, ми не є НОО, ми є громадянська ініціатива. І, власне, і Олексій, і Сергій сказали, що вони, одна з площин, які працюють, це є реформа поліції, реформа міліції, реформа поліції. І, власне, я хотіла б вас запитати про ваші перспективи співпраці, тобто ваша перспектива співпраці з неурядовими організаціями, які є там, наприклад, трансферці, організації, які дуже відомі, мають професійні ресурси, мають професіонали, які працюють з ними, експерти працюють з донорами. І у вас як організація, яка працює з членами, тобто у вас є активний склад людей, вони не обов'язково мають мати якісь досвід працювати в НОБО як професіонал, це не є місце. І Олексій, тобто, як ви теж намагаєтеся працювати з цими якими громадськими ініціативами, людьми активними, але які не обов'язково знають, як на це, наприклад, проект закону, наприклад, там, реформа поліції або якісь законодавчі акти, але можуть, наприклад, створювати базу підтримки або поширювати ці ідеї, або навіть випробовувати ці ідеї, тобто наскільки вони є як на суспільстві і людям зрозуміли. Тобто, це можливо підтримка. Дякую, що ти казала.
Дякую, Наталю. Тепер Сюзан Стюарт піднімає руку, так.
Susan Stewart from the SWP in Berlin. It's a government-financed German think tank. I have two questions. The first one emerges from some comments made by Alexei and also by Katya in her keynote speech about sort of, on the one hand, what she mentioned, Alexei, about the emergence of some sort of alternative government, and also what Katya was saying about basically NGOs supplementing or actually substituting for the state in terms of some kind of humanitarian functions. And I'm just wondering, because it's not the first time that I heard in some discussions about basically civil society being some kind of at least temporary replacement for the state, whether this is not a kind of a dangerous phenomenon, both in the sense that it may be basically an overwhelming challenge for civil society, and also in the sense that it somehow relieves the state of the need to fulfill these functions, which in fact it should be fulfilling. So that's the first question, and the second one is to what you mentioned, as I understood it, one of the features of your party is that it does not have any kind of leadership structure. So I'm just wondering, I understand where that's coming from in the sense that the Ukrainian political parties, like you said, have not been real parties and have often been some kind of vehicle for one individual. But on the other hand, you were mentioning that you've looked at some other examples of European parties. Are there any successful examples that actually don't have a leadership structure, and how can a party function and be successful without one?
Thank you very much. Do we have more questions? Okay, please.
Да, у мене
Прошу представитися.
Да, Валерій. Валерій Довгенко, спільне бачення. Я що готував матеріал по податковій реформі. Також спілкувався з людьми, які займалися розробкою законопроекту про ілюстрацію.
Можна визначити?
Да, в розрізі цих двох реформ я мав, скажімо так, змішане враження від експертів, які працювали над цим ХПР. Ну, детальніше. Значить, податкову реформу написала людина, яка всі непременно хотіла переписати податковий кодекс, щоб це було його авторство. Я за ним радісно підхопив те, що він запропонував, оскільки воно по формі це те, що нам потрібно. Це не буде працювати, ми це підхоплюємо і кажемо, що ставимо тут прямо, що ми порадили з громадянським суспільством. З законопроектом про ілюстрацію всі знають, що це такий файл. Там вийшло дуже просто. Особливо, який займався цим законопроектом, просто не мав достатньої грамотності, щоб його вчити. Я це говорю для того, щоб спитати, чи ведеться робота над тим, щоб помилки не повторювалося. І як саме з цим боротися. Дякую.
Дякую. Маємо ще два. Прошу. Так. Пан Станов.
Олег Скірнов, інформаційно-дослідний центр інтеграції та розвиток. У мене питання до Ольги Горошник. Таке, що ви дуже гарно і романтично розказували про ті сили, які підтримують Майдан в Харкові. Але Харків, ви самі сказали, велике місто, і дійсно там дуже багато людей з різними поглядами. І якщо ті групи або лідери, які підтримували антимайдан з Харкова, вони поїхали там уже воювати за Донецьку Народну Республіку, але багато людей залишилось, які з іншими поглядами. Наскільки на сьогодні ці люди, вони в себе щось накоплюють, і це може виплеснутись. Чи є якийсь діалог з людьми з різними поглядами на рівні Харкова?
Дякую, прошу, Михайло Вінницький.
У мене питання до Олексія, якщо можна в парі. Ви використали цікаву метафору саме про громадянське суспільство як амебу, яка раптом появилася в ній шкелет. Я би дуже просив, якщо можна, щоб ви трошечки заповнили, можливо, не метафорою, а все-таки якоюсь конкретною цю метафору. Справа в тому, що існує певна, як Катя дуже гарно сказала, певна така розбіжність між старим громадянським суспільством, давайте таким скажемо, між тими громадськими організаціями, які існували до Революції Гідності, які дуже часто отримували різного роду західне фінансування, і різними такими спонтанними активістами, як, наприклад, Майдан чи ФР, і так далі. І я, в принципі, не впевнений, що я бачу скелет. Тим більше, що скелет переважно появляється тоді, коли появляється фінансування, а фактично, хоча я не погоджуюся з цим, але всі фактично, які сьогодні виступають, дуже засуджували слово олігарх. Для мене олігарх – це просто багата людина, і мені не дуже зрозуміло, чому ми його засуджуємо, але якщо ми його засуджуємо, то тоді питання, звідки ми будемо брати фінансування на ініціативи, такі які дозволять, що називається sustainability, і той скелет, про який ми говоримо.
Дуже дякую. Поки що ми так. Дуже багато було запитань до Олексія Хмари, то ми почнемо з інших колег, яким було формовано запитання. Прошу тоді, можливо, Дмитрий там перший.
Actually, thank you very much for this question. Very good question. When I was talking about leadership, I didn't mean absence of leadership structure at all. This is first. Secondly, please, could you please raise the hands, those of you who knows who is leader of Democratic Party of the United States? Who is the leader of Republican Party of the United States? I also don't know. I don't know, but it works. In the European Union, in European countries, the situation is completely different. There are huge and long-lasting history of existence of political parties. There are permanent dialogue, except those radical like Le Pen, which managed to inherit the post from her father, but other democratic parties, they normally go through democratic procedures. The same in our party. When we were making decision to run in the elections, it was during Congress, extraordinary Congress for our party. Yeah? We also conducted small primaries. Nobody knew who will be first in the party list. Nobody knew who will be second, third, or fifth. But all those who wanted to be in the list presented themselves. Then we had sort of secret ballot votes, and those who won, they were in the list. Next time, maybe another person will be, but if the person has got a trust, then during the election campaign, this person is responsible for everything as number one. If we would go to parliament, when we will go to the parliament, that person which will be elected as the first will be responsible for everything, will normally form the government, will become a prime minister and so on. But what I meant that we have many leaders. We have a system according to our chapter, how the head of political council should act for what period of time, 6 months, and then elections. He can be elected also for another 6 months, but not more. They know to prepare more and more people ready for leadership positions in the government and in the parliament. That's it. Okay.
Тобто Майдан, у нас було запитання, хто з нас хоче відповісти.
So there was a question regarding possibility to cooperate between After Maidan and Transparency International. Of course, yes, we want. I think we can combine experience of After Maidan in making pressure on authorities and huge experience of Transparency International on an expertise level. So if we have common goal to reform Ministry of Internal Affairs, I think we can do it, of course. But general rule, because After Maidan also cooperated in the past with many organizations. For instance, we supported illustration law, and we cooperated with Yegor Sobolev, with Samopomosh also. We also cooperated with many volunteers who deliver humanitarian aid to Ukrainian soldiers. We do it every day. But in politics, we have general rule in After Maidan that we don't have friends. We are non-partisan, 100%. We don't have friends, but those who share our values and those who have the same goals as after Maidan, of course, we can cooperate.
Прошу, Ольга Мирошна, чи у вас було запитання? Я постараюсь дуже швидко, тому що в мене відповідь навіть в письмовому вигляді на ваше питання. Мабуть, ви всі знаєте, що таке слово медіація. Медіація – це діалог шляхом примирення шляхом діалогу. Ми запровадили в Харкові такий проєкт. Навіть створили лабораторію мирних рішень при фонді, якому я очолюю, при фонді місцевої демократії, тепер працює лабораторія мирних рішень. Що це таке? Ми хочемо запровадити серію діалогу між людьми, між всіма жителями міста з полярними точками зору, для того, щоб вони навчилися вирішувати конфліктну ситуацію мирним шляхом діалогу. Такий діалог перший ми вже провели, взяли Майдан і антимайдан. Якраз у нас знесли дуже великий пам'ятник Леніну, і ми запросили тих, хто зносив, і тих, хто захищав. І їх посадили в одному залі. Це була перша наша медіація, перший наш діалог. Через 15 хвилин забули про пам'ятник, хоча тема була, що робити з Леніним, і почали говорити далі, як нам далі жити в одному місті, маючи різні точки зору. Тобто ми розпочали цей проєкт зараз поширюється, і я сподіваюся, що шляхом діалогів ми все-таки поляризацію в нашому місті, поляризацію цих поглядів ми зменшимо. Цей накал і буде все добре, сподіваюся.
Дуже прошу Олексій, чи запитання до вас задамо?
Так, були питання, друзі, тому буду відповідати в режимі телеграму. Взаємодія з grassroots organization і так далі. Насправді, я хотів би, щоб ви правильно розуміли, революційний пакет реформ це сьогодні такі собі 300 спартанців, які стоять на заслоні великих сил, ворогів, в тому числі середньої держави. Але вони не здатні весь час тримати оборону. Тому потрібна загальна мобілізація всіх, хто це може робити. У нас немає іншого вибору, як працювати з місцевими організаціями, активістами, ініціативами, які, власне, мало би і хотіли би вихоплювати такі ініціативи реформи на ініціативу по всій державі. Насправді, у нас доволі гарна співпраця, як у РПР з Автомайданом, під час різноманітних акцій під парламентом чи урядом. Вони в цьому великі молодці, ми вже дуже вчимося. А ми сильні в експертизі, люди сильні в екшнах, тобто роботі з вулиці, з акціях прямої дії. Таке поєднання потрібне, воно важливе і воно є. Його треба ще далі розвивати насправді, бо вдосконалості вже немає. Якщо говорити про РПР як альтернативний уряд і про те, наскільки ми маємо достатній capacity, щоб бути якоюсь силою. Знаєте, а це як сьогодні дивитися дуже трьох потенційно добрих міністрів фінансів в цій державі. Просто вони не виникли, за 20 років майже не виникли. Або, не знаю, 5 хороших міністрів закордонних справ. Практично неможливо, особливо з нових облич. Чому так? Тому що багато років формувалося еліта з різних середовищ, в тому числі з громадянських середовищ. І це велика правда, що ми маємо обмежену спроможність. На сьогодні, по суті, немає кого замінити мене, наприклад, корупції, якщо не брати ще 2-3 людей з цієї теми. Тому ми працюємо над цією проблемою, але, на жаль, ми не можемо її вирішити швидко. І ми, як громадянське суспільство, на сьогодні маємо окреслену структуру, яка показує якісні результати, але ми не маємо сталу структуру, так, sustainability component is not, I don't know, developing in our case. Тобто ми маємо над цим працювати, друзі. У нас є ще купа чого попереду. Так що все нас чекає далі. Якщо говорити про країну в цілому, друзі, я хотів би нагадати, що зараз ми живемо в епоху Дикого Заходу в Сполучених Штатах Америки, коли люди, переселенці з інших територій, наново будували державу, заводили спільні правила гри. А по суті, хто це було? Каторжники, бандити, люди, шукачі пригод, не знаю, шукачі мрій і так далі, які не хотіли домовлятися, не хотіли жити разом. Було одне правило, у кого більше пістолетів, хто краще стріляє. Але зрештою люди зрозуміли, що якщо не будуть кооперуватися, якщо вони не будуть певні правила гри, то це закінчиться нічим для всіх. Якщо ви знаєте, сьогодні Штати вважаються одним з еталонів дотримання різноманітних прав, в тому числі прав людини. Нас чекає приблизно те саме. Ми змушені домовлятися, змушені наново створити державу разом. Я думаю, у нас це виходить. Нам в цьому дуже допомагають сусіди. І останні буквально ремарки з приводу закону про люстрацію, інший закон про податковий кодекс, як не допускати далі таких рішень. Я хотів би зразу пояснити, колеги, що податкова реформа, яку просуває уряд, не має нічого спільного з напрацюванням РПР. Нічого спільного. Так, як все має виглядати, написано в коаліційній угоді. Але, на жаль, це не є частиною програми уряду і його підходу. У нас є велика маніпуляція певними гаслами, ідеями зі сторони посадовців високого рівня. І це те, по чому ми не можемо домовитися зараз поки що з урядом. Якщо ж говорити про закон про очищення влади, то є велика дискусія навіть всередині експертного середовища, чи хороший закон, який він є. Але без цього стартера реформи, насправді ми б ще 10 років чекали діалогу про те, чи треба очищувати владу, в який спосіб. Ми не кажемо, що це закон ідеальний, в нього є ціла купа проблем, але це стартер реформ. Тобто те, що запускає початок реформ держави. Дякую вам.
Дякую. Можливо, деякі аспекти не повністю висвітлені ті, які запитували, тим не менше, в нас немає часу, тому я дуже хочу подякувати всім доповідачам і всім учасникам цієї панелі. Я сподіваюся, що нам може старт для подальшої роботи конференції. Дякую.
Thank you all for coming indeed. It was a very fascinating discussion, especially also for the forums here. I keep your confidence and all the courage. And I sometimes think that Western civil society can learn from you indeed. We will proceed with a short coffee break right now. It will be all there in this room, but please make yourself, or just ask yourself, not to make yourself too comfortable, but just to come back to the room with a coffee or a piece of cake, so that we can proceed no later than 11:40 with the next panel. Thank you.
Oi. USA. Ein wenig. Ja, Maidan. Ja, der hat es gar nicht so leicht. Krass. USA mit den Banditen zu assoziieren. Sie wissen gar nichts. Die Abgeordneten sind halt so Там декілька файлів. Назви Part 1. Conference Part 1. Сейчас, в принципі, їх можна просто скинути на... Там конференс, так, а потім там підпали. Конференс, купа Ні, ДЦМ, потім робиш папу, так? Пардон, це не панель. Це все вийшло з 9 до 11. Пардон. 9:00 до 11. Тепер звідси файло DCM, DMV. Що це?
Без падения, все. Совсем сгребать.
Так, підбай. Тобто ти копіюєш зараз, так?
Я вигрібаю.
Та ні, в мене там місце ще є.
Вдруг раптом не станеш.
А, ну добре, тоді зробимо іншу підпапку, бо воно буде називати 000 і таке інше.
Ну, звісно, ми будемо розпитати. Потім потратиш бензину, щоб продати.
А що там кава для всіх? Тут пішли пити. А, там воно буде зараз ще.
Because you don't want to antagonize them, because otherwise they are spoilers for the new generation. But on the other hand, you want to build the new government and new politics, new civil society with new people. So you have to find a very good balance between having new leaders who are critical jobs. So the most important leaders have to be new ones, I think, especially clean ones concerning corruption. And on the other hand, you have to be careful not to make it cut too strictly in order to antagonize not too many people who will then otherwise become a force that might be dangerous for the Union. So it's a very difficult balancing act, and I would recommend very strongly to consult with those in other countries who did these kinds of administration, also, for example, for officers, which is very important to me, in order to see what kind of experience they made, and in order to avoid the mistakes.
Control police. And which is responsible not only for war, but also for safety in their sector, so like normal. No, regarding this, So we were on board to reform traffic police to present our honestly said that traffic police this form knowledge of life. Scared. But one thing was that this concept, there was a decision to launch. You can say launch, but in fact it's always fire.
One of the demands of basically appearance of so we have to gather opinions which could be potential mistakes in this process. Maybe what should we take from the experience of Yes. Which potential mistakes should avoid? I think illustration is a very important process where all things prove for the Ukrainians after the revolution. And of course, there's also the danger when it doesn't happen that the results of the regime are associated with revolution is legitimized if most important times are not addressed or trials
These terrible experiences on us almost universities and other Western nations decided for us microtransactions. They had very interesting messages that it's very important to pause the activities politically trial, discrimination cases, the rest politicians and bureaucrats to handle them only with for instance, to have the chance to return to society and not to get blindly through the process. Not create that's very important for the Thank you.
Чуєш, моя кількість безпоміж.
Ти виняв?
А я ще не виняв, тому що жениться там 70%.
Йо-моє. Давай тоді ескейпи.
Ні, який ескейп?
Зараз ми відмітимо ті, які скопіювалися, ми їх закриємо, воно ж не буде передбирати. Знову чіпаю.
Капку ставлю, все, нехай.
Блін, прикинь. Хватає перед.
Ты на зовнішній ну, потім переженемо на довгі перерви.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the coffee break. We now proceed with our second panel of the first theme. If you want so, this is now, we now speak about the same topic, of course, we speak about the development of Ukraine's civil society, but we do so more from an expert and analytical perspective. I welcome the panel Jakob Mischke, again I welcome Ms. Martin, I welcome Ms. Solomenko, and I welcome Ms. Stewart from the SWP in Berlin. Our moderator is Maxim Yakovev. Enjoy the panel.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats, and I hope we can proceed. Before I start, I would like to introduction practical. So during the coffee break, I thought about this thing. I think we're all clever and smart people. One thing we never lack is arrogance. And since we're all smart and clever, we're respectively arrogant, the other thing arrogant people do is actually we force others to listen to us. But the problem with forcing others to listen to us is that there is no dialogue coming up. So in our panel, we're going to organize it this way. We have like a very short introduction on the content of our panel, this topic, and we'd like to have more time for you to ask questions and for all of us to have a discussion. Now finally, irrespective of the arrogance or smartness or something, even ordinary people tend to get very angry when they're hungry, so we have to finish on time since the lunch is waiting for us already, okay? We're now half an hour late, so to speak, but I hope that in this time we'll have an intense and fruitful discussion. So not only us here sitting at the panel, this very solid style procedure and then talking to you, but maybe there'll be reaction coming from you as well. So I would like to use this opportunity to talk, because I'm now chairing this panel, and I would like to introduce the speakers here to tell some details about them in order how they are going to present to you. So I would like to start with Dr. Susan Stewart. She has a very interesting biography, which I got to know recently, and she introduced herself briefly when asking a question. She permanently resides in Germany, where she is a research fellow at the German Institute of International Relations and Security Affairs in Berlin. And so she does research on, her field of expertise is research and policy advising on European Union and Russian relations, as well as Ukraine and the eastern dimension of the European neighborhood policy. She holds her doctorate degree from the University of Mannheim in social sciences, and it's interesting, the topic of
correct me if I'm wrong, but there's an interesting topic with the question, why has Ukraine remained peaceful? So explaining the low levels of ethno-political conflict. So I did an interesting question why Ukraine still remains peaceful to some extent with the war not in the eastern part. But it's interesting that the whole question of dissertation like this was surprising to me. So she also has a master degree in international relations from the Bachelor School of Law and Diplomacy, and a bachelor in studying languages and literature, magna cum laude, from the Harvard University. Yeah. And I also read in your biography that you did a fellowship in Soviet times at the Moscow State University, and then also a short stay in a scholarship at Tbilisi, also back in USSR time. So Dr. Stewart is definitely knowledgeable of our part of the world in general, and the Ukrainian issues in particular. Yeah? Second on our panel is, who's going to talk second, is Jakub Miszka, and it is my great pleasure to present a person whom we had an opportunity to work together for 2 years, because Jakub Miszka was also coordinator of German European Studies Master Program, which I'm the Ukrainian part, he was the German part of it for 2 years, so we kind of know each other very well. You know? So now Jakub Miszka is working at the Kyiv University in Münster, in Germany, since May 2014. At the Study Baltic department of this university. He has his master degree in East European Studies and Public Economics from the Free University of Berlin. So his field of expertise, as far as I know, and as I said, like the long history of communication and friendship, is the Europeanization of Ukrainian politics. And I have to say that he is a very important person for us Ukrainians, because once you turn into Ukraine, speak Ukrainian, the audience you have, the audience that you listen to you understand is very limited. He's also involved into translation business, so he makes Ukrainian comprehensible translations for the rest of the world, which is very nice. Now he's working on the projects of law and sociology, interdisciplinary at this university, and I'm glad he could make us here and talk. Then, moving from Jakub to our Kyiv-Mohyla gang here, we have interesting people because we all three studied at Kyiv-Mohyla Academy at different points of time. And Irina Sonenko, we also know each other from Renaissance Foundation from the times back there when she worked there. And some short notes in her biography. She has a Bachelor of Arts in History from this university, and she graduated the year I entered, so I took over from them. She also holds a Master degree in International Relations and European Studies from the Central University in Budapest. She has also a certificate of studies from the University of Birmingham, where she was on a scholarship doing research, and now she's at the OCF scholar, the European University of Vienna. And it's just LinkedIn actually counted your time there, time you spent. It was 2 years and 3 months. Yeah. So she's researching the projection, the role of informal politics in post-communist transformation, which I think is exactly the topic I'm going to talk about. And I have a whole long list of biography of Dr. Katerina here. And I think I was very glad that you could come and give a keynote speech to tackle a bit of your biography. Dr. Smiley, she dealt with international organization, she worked for diplomatic missions. I read that there was the US Embassy in Kyiv, and you were responsible for basically connection between the embassy and the NaUKMA, so this bridge between diplomacy, foreign missions to Ukraine, and our governmental institutions. Dr. Smiley has a PhD from the History Department of the Central European University. A very interesting topic is a path available online client pattern relationships in Ukrainian politics, which is a brilliant piece. I like it personally very much. So, and she also has a master in law studies from the University of Reading in England, and a BA in cultural studies from NaUKMA. And Dr. Smiley was also a Fulbright and a scholar, and I read that you also colleagues and that you are associate professor at the Kyiv National University of Arts. Okay? So this is our distinguished panel, and people are going to present the speakers in the way I announced them, and then we're going to read from the summary and then you ask questions. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I would like to give basically some impressions looking from the outside at the development of Ukrainian civil society. And I would like to begin with basically what I see as some of the very positive aspects. I think, of course, it's important to discuss some of the deficiencies and how these can be remedied, but I think it's also important to look at how far Ukrainian civil society has come, certainly in the past years, and now particularly in the period since the Maidan or through the Maidan. And I think that one very important aspect, and this was basically referred to a bit also earlier, that there is such a strong will now among so many civil society activists, particularly in comparison to the time after the Orange Revolution, to ensure that now actual reforms do occur. And I think that civil society is, despite the problems that we've already mentioned, better organized and in a better situation to tackle that, and also is aware of its own deficiencies. So I think this very conference and these discussions reflect that actually there's a lot of work being done on how to overcome the problems that exist, and there's a lot of awareness of these problems. And I think there are also, even though this is to some extent still a deficiency, but there are more emerging contacts between Kyiv and the regions. I think that's been one of the outcomes of the Maidan, that this has been reinforced and increased its presence, or it's starting to be present to a much greater extent than before. And there's also, as far as I can judge, although it's very difficult to find statistical information on this, significantly more activity in many of the regions than before, or some of the activists that were already there have been become even more active. I think also what we've seen, and this is not just a result of the Maidan, but this is actually something that had emerged before, this accumulated body of expertise, which really makes it possible, if there is a political will, and I think one of the problems is that this is a big question mark about whether there is this political will. There are a lot of projects, draft laws and ideas, conceptual papers and so on, ready to go and being fed into the policy process to some extent. But the question of the extent, I think is still an open one. But the positive thing is that this expertise is there in the civil society. And there's also, there were previously contacts to some people in the power structures, and these have been also intensified through, as was already mentioned, the entry into parliament in particular of civil society activists. And finally, I think there is some basically data that indicates that even though this connection between civil society on the one hand and the broader society on the other is still in some ways weak, nonetheless, if you look at, first of all, how opinions about civil society have been developing, they have been becoming, A, more positive, and B, there is more awareness of civil society, even if there are maybe problems that people can't really define what it is, or have trouble naming some kind of organizations. Still, I think on the whole, the attitude in general for civil society is becoming more positive over the past years, not just, actually I don't know about since the Maidan, but in the years prior to that. And there's also evidence that there's been more media contact. Media have reached out more to civil society organizations, and the organizations have maybe become more present in the media. So those are all, I think, trends that indicate that there is a positive development on many levels, and that it is likely to continue because of this awareness within civil society of what is needed, and these needs are being addressed to the extent possible in the current situation. Now moving on briefly to some of the problematic aspects. Of course, there's a question of financing, which we haven't talked about so much here, and I think that one problem is that there's relatively little financing coming from the state. And obviously this is a reflection of the overall desperate economic situation, but I think it's also a reflection of the fact that there's really very little appreciation in state structures for civil society and the role that it can play, and recognition that this role, it makes sense to financially compensate this role and not just to expect it to be provided free of charge. And then there's also the question of the weakness of civil society in many of the regions, which is only now being to some extent addressed, and also the coordination mechanisms among the different organizations, which that was also referred to here earlier, that this sort of sense of potential jealousy or simply the difficulties in finding a common agenda and working together on that. I think that's also being addressed to some extent, but it's still a problem. And one aspect that I think hasn't so much been mentioned here so far is this sort of potential tension between the needs of that have arisen with as a result of the war in the East on the one hand, and the needs of the reform agenda more broadly on the other hand, because I think a lot of resources from civil society are really being drained by the war effort, the need to help the army. Some of this, what I was talking about before, about replacing the state in some of its functions, and that has been kind of overtaken to some extent, or overshadowed this kind of focus on the reform agenda, which I fear is now being less addressed by civil society because of this strong focus on the war and its consequences. All right, and then I think it's important to look at civil society sort of not only in and of itself, but to put it in this larger context, because I think that basically, because of the positive aspects that I mentioned, civil society is well positioned, in fact, to push forward reforms, but it's going to meet these constant breaks on reform from the political and the economic elite, or large parts thereof, and also from the bureaucracy. So I think that this also leads to the question that I posed earlier in the first round about the question of to what extent is it really realistic to expect that civil society can replace certain state functions, and if it's not realistic, then how can civil society work toward, instead of trying to replace them, actually making sure that the state becomes more capable of taking those over? And I think this is really an enormous challenge going forward. And perhaps the final comment that I would make is, if you look at the broader society, I mean, my personal concern looking at the developments both during the Maidan and in particular in the Donbass is that in parts of the society, violence has become a more legitimate means of dealing with conflict. And that this might have some kind of, or it will have consequences for how society responds to developments in the future, and I think there's maybe a very small window of time in which real reforms actually have a chance to happen. Otherwise, it's not clear what the response of the broader society will be, and whether it will be able to sort of feed into this kind of constructive approach by many civil society organizations, or whether both parts of the broader society and some of these sort of uncivil organizations may in fact be more poised to use methods which could include violence and could lead to a very difficult situation in the country. So, and that combination of kind of positives and negatives will conclude.
Thank you. We are very now well on time, so we have a good timing. So thank you for your contribution. Instead, we'll then recap and then discuss the whole contribution together. So I'm now passing the microphone over to Jakub Mischka.
It's working. Okay. So yeah, we talked about civil society being an alternative government for Ukraine. I want to concentrate on the alternative Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the alternative embassies of Ukraine that were formed in a way by civil society during Maidan and afterwards. And just try to analyze how it worked and what were the results. To make it short, the aim of the alternative foreign policy of Ukraine was to bring Western governments to imposing sanctions first on Yanukovych to step down and to allow more democracy in the country. And after the change of power, it was the sanctions against Russia because of the legal annexation of Crimea and so on. And so, how did people do it? So there are three main fields. You can say we have lobbyism, we have working with the public sphere, and we have providing data to international experts. Speaking about lobbyism, well, I now will be concentrating on the situation in Germany, and in Germany we don't really have an influential diaspora as in Canada or the US, where they have good relations to the government and can put through their topics more easily. In Germany, the activists who wanted to do something, nevertheless were able to talk to some members of the parliament in the Bundestag and trying to put the agenda through to provide them with information about the situation, about their views information, in order to counteract the official state line of thinking in this sphere. But actually, we have to say the Ukrainian embassy in Berlin never really was very eager to defend the Yanukovych regime at this time. And there were even some points where civil society and the embassy were working together into lobbying to put more pressure on the president. And so this was one field. The bigger and more important field was working with the German public sphere, and this is the topic of the so-called information war, where the diaspora did a very try to work to influence the German public sphere very hard. So if you look at how journalism works in Germany, then see when it's about the facts, what is really happening in Ukraine, then most media outlets are relying on sources that they have inside Ukraine. So the TV stations, the newspapers, they send their people to Kyiv in order to report from the ground. And so working with journalism was more something that was done here in Kyiv. And most of these journalists came to Ukraine the first time. They didn't really know much about the situation, so they had to rely on local sources and to work together with journalists. And in this way, many journalists and civil society activists who were working together with journalists here were able to influence what they would be writing afterwards. And this worked very well. For example, these initiatives like Stop Fake were very important, and they were also much cited in German media when they made reports about the Russian propaganda and official state propaganda, and it works very well. So this is about the facts, but if it goes about the interpretation of the events, so what is really happening, what do the events mean to Germany and to German foreign policy, then we see that these interpretations are formed more in Berlin and in the western cities when people who are more closely to the decision makers are talking about their views and what are the steps that need to be done. And in this process, in interpreting these events, then some events from the diaspora were also very important in Germany. For example, in Germany, it was Ukrainian Katia Petrovska, who lately won a very prestigious literary prize, and she had some, well, she left Ukraine more than 20 years ago, and she hadn't really much connections, but she was a very important voice because she was known in the German public sphere, and newspapers were ready to print her. She had even a radio show on the Deutschlandfunk, where she was interviewing some Ukrainian writers and artists about the events, and this was very important. And the other important persons were Ukrainian writers who are published in Germany, and these are mostly the most well-known writers like Yuri Androchovich, Andrei Krokov, Uni-Jena, who regularly wrote had articles in German newspapers, and they were able to explain to the German public what's really happening in Ukraine, what are the main conflicts, and how Ukrainians are feeling about the situations. Yeah, and in order to talk about the third topic, data, then we also have to see when experts like us are writing about the Ukrainian sphere, the most reliable data source for us is also civil society, because as we all know, we cannot really trust the official data provided by the government, and also the statistical data is not really very trustable. So civil society has also very can also influence how we see in Germany these events by providing these data, and this is also a topic because in the situation where we have a war actually in the country, it's people also start, of course, to put their own political views into the data, and people ask themselves, what are we telling to other people? How are we presenting the situations? And this also changed during the events on the Maidan. If we talk about, for example, the story with the fascists on the Maidan, so there were also discussions, how do we present it, that this cannot be used by the Russian propaganda against the Maidan. This is also a big issue. So I think I stop here.
Thank you. It's interesting, just from a short reflection, interesting you mentioned this idea of the Western journalists coming to Kyiv. I think we all, some point of history, like encountered this. And the German journalists coming to Kyiv, a person had very different experience, ranging from a very positive one to a negative one. We have somebody coming from an educated country to talk to you, to Ukrainians, and to monkeys. Nothing. But there was a different experience. We can also talk about that later, how people get information from Ukraine about Ukrainian growth. It's also an interesting topic. Thank you, Jakob. Now I pass the word to Ms. Please.
Thank you. I will make a few points about how society has transformed in the past years, and I think this transformation has increased the democratizing role or efficiency of civil society. And the first point I'd like to make is that civil society has transformed from being a parallel reality or a state in a state, if you want, to a group of people or segment of society which has some impact and has better links to the government, to the decision-making process, and to the citizens on the other hand. Because if you look at the situation before the Euromaidan, civil society was very active and developed in Ukraine anyway. But it didn't have any impact on decision-making process, and it didn't have any reach out. It couldn't reach out to the citizens because media in Ukraine is privatized, and society didn't have access to the media in many cases. The internet was not so well developed. So I think it's the biggest change which happened thanks to the Euromaidan and after the Euromaidan. And now we see that there are a lot of links on points of access to decision making. One of them, which was presented by the CFAR. Another one is that many civil society representatives are now in the parliament and partially in the government. And also we see how much internet media has developed, and this gives more, and we know that this internet media favors very much the society activists, society experts, invite them to comment things, and people who watch or use the internet, they can have much more information. Yeah, so I think there are a lot of links now. Or they are not sufficient, of course, but I think civil society is not anymore the thing in itself as it was before. Second point I'd like to make that, and it was already discussed today, but this emergence of different horizontal, informal, not registered initiatives. Yeah, but I would like to say that this speaks in favor of consolidation of civil society in some way. We talk about different horizontal networks which emerged. I would say shortly before Yanukovych came to power, I think it was provoked by the idea of the Orange Revolution. Civil society realized that there was no control and now it's time to do something. So I remember this first initiative, which was called New Citizen campaign, yeah, to control the new president, whoever the new president was going to be. It was not clear at that point, Tymoshenko or Yanukovych. And then we saw other similar initiatives like Stop Censorship, which brought together a lot of journalists all over Ukraine, or Chesno movement, which controlled members of the parliament and so on. I think it's a very positive development, and then reanimation package of reforms is another example. I think this speaks in favor of consolidation of civil society, which is also very positive. And these kind of groups have more advocacy potential than individual NGOs, of course, or think tanks. So this is a positive thing. A third development, and also was discussed today, but civil society has become a substitute for the state. It might be a negative development as well. But I think it also speaks in favor of, it means that sort of active citizenry has emerged in Ukraine, which is also not the case. So there are many more people now who feel personal responsibility for developments in the country, not like before. According to some opinion polls, over 70% of people in Ukraine started donating money or doing some voluntary job, which is a very positive and also new development. So traditionally, civil society has done some job for the state. Mostly the state will outsource some activities, mostly in the social sphere, like taking care of elderly or disadvantaged people. Now civil society, of course, is playing many more roles the state should be playing, yeah, I think it's positive in the sense that citizenry has become more active and more responsible. And third point I'd like to make, there are still segments of civil society which are important and somehow are not playing their function. For instance, trade unions. And if we talk about association agreement, there are a number of aspects in the association agreement which concern safety of workplace, rights of workers, and so on. And trade unions in Ukraine do not play their function in this sense. I think there is a potential maybe for international donors, for trade unions from Western Europe maybe to engage here and to make these actors play their role, because the association agreement provides a basis. It is a tool which can be used to exercise pressure. Yeah? Business associations a bit better, I think, because there is a real potential to get access to the EU market, and business associations are trying to be more active in this sense, but still I think there is more potential for them to do that. Yeah, so I'd like to stop here. I'll let you explain these few points. Thank you.
Thank you. Is now in our panel's tradition. Thank you for being on time. So a lot of time left. And thank you for tackling this interesting issue about trade unions and some remnants from the Soviet past actually we had, and the role now how they transform and mention this developments and setting up. So we'll definitely go back to that later. So I would now like to pass the microphone over to Dr. Slavin.
Yes, in fact, it's difficult for me to add something new to what I just presented to you at the beginning of this conference. But getting back to the title of our second panel, Civil Society and Democratization, the question of the panel was halfway done or everything to play for. I would just give you 3 examples of why I believe that we're still halfway done, and that still there is a big road we have in Ukrainian civil society that wants to accomplish here and make a difference in Ukraine as a country. You probably noticed that in the last year, Ukrainian civil society organizations started working on the vast array of issues. Like they pick up every problem that exists in this country, and they believe that they are capable, as institutionally or professionally, to resolve this problem.
I believe it is a high time for Ukrainian civil society to stop for a second and to look at yourself and try to resolve the problems which exist within the sector itself. Let me explain what I mean in this regard. First of all, we shouldn't forget that professional management of NGOs requires professional managers. There is no single institution in Ukraine these days that offers a degree in non-profit management. There is only one certificate program at the Ukrainian Catholic University, and I know not a single course even here at the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy that will teach future leaders of civil society organizations on how to organize financial management, how to organize effective fundraising campaigns, and how to work with journalists, how to deliver their messages to the public. All these technical issues are critical if you want to establish a really well-functioning institution. The second issue which civil society organizations have to address is how accountable are they to the society at large, or are they only accountable to the donors who provide funding for their operations? I remember as a manager of the International Renaissance Foundation, I myself had a lot of difficulty getting complete reports from my grantees about who their co-sponsors are, in addition to IRS funding. It's always the same issue for a donor, whether or not your grantee receives money only from you, or whether some of the activities can be funded by other institutions and you don't even know about it. I don't want to bring specific examples, but believe me that these instances are very often, and we should encourage our civil society organizations to be more accountable and more transparent. There is still a lot to be done. The second problem, which is somehow interrelated with this vast array of issues that the civil society wants to address, is of course lack of professionalism. Alexei, in the beginning of this of the first panel, has praised the reanimation reform package and this office of the cabinet minister that works on reforms. In addition to debates and in addition to the never-ending process of drafting the reform agenda, it would be also good to have something done and have something accomplished. American philosophers, American pragmatists say that the best strategy is the one which is actually implemented in practice. Yes, you can make mistakes along the way. Yes, you may not succeed in everything, but please start doing something, not only debating about how effectively you will be working in months ahead. The very specific example, which is very close to my heart, is how the civil society groups that work at the Culture Ministry of Ukraine for the last 8 months have been debating the culture policy for 2025. First of all, it wasn't clear when we have the year 25 as our final goal, when we have the crisis in the country, and we really need emergency steps in order to bring the country together, to save our museums in the East, when we have collections in museums which are being lost. So instead of addressing those very specific emergency cases, these activists just enjoy themselves in a room, just putting all the beautiful words in the air, how wonderful it will be when we finally reach this moment of 2025, and Ukraine will become a very good state. And the third dilemma, which is extremely important and probably require more time and effort, intellectual effort for us to resolve, is how to combine democratization with nation building. Unfortunately, what we see nowadays is that many civil society organizations, especially in the East, they identify civic activism with patriotism. They think that civic activism is all about wrapping yourself in a flag and studying collecting money for the Ukrainian army. One activist very nicely put it in her recent interview to Ukrainian that what Maidan, which wanted to open the borders with the European Union to make Ukraine an open society, now with this very strong emphasis on patriotism, in fact, closes our society down. Europe, which is based on the ideas of multiculturalism, of multilingualism, probably will not fully appreciate our efforts
focusing on the promotion of the Ukrainian language at the cost of the other languages of the national minorities. If I may just recommend Ukrainian civil society organizations to really remember that civic activism is not only about patriotism and this national revival thing, it's also about advocacy work, it's about very sound efforts in the field of anti-corruption legislation. And in this sphere, civil society organizations really have to work more closely with think tanks to build, to base all recommendations that they make to the government on real evidence, on data. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff that is being now developed by the Innovation Reform Package is very weak, simply because these recommendations are not always supported by real sociological data, etc. Maybe some of you have watched days ago the beautiful ceremony at the National Democratic NDI, right? National Democratic Institute in Washington, where 3 heroes of Maidan, Uni-Jena, and Sonontai received NDI's awards as strongest Ukrainian civic leaders. And in her very moving and emotional address to the audience, Anna said that Ukrainians should understand that it's high time for us to stop blaming someone. We should stop blaming Putin, we should stop blaming Yanukovych for all our problems. We have just to stop looking at the enemy. It's time for us to stop this discourse of all and be forward-looking and forward-oriented and really think about how to make our efforts more professionally and more appealing to the population of Ukraine.
Thank you, thank you. And now, if I may, I would like to start recapping from your speech then, and then to the other ideas I know, which I find interesting, so that I would not have to ask you questions and then you will go to the more details. So Katerina said I really like it very much because I think I also will say this, I have this point that the problem with Ukrainian nation building, state, and organization is like not that people are implementing plans, it's sometimes that people come and say, I have a plan, how to make a plan. And you're stuck in this trap of planning the plan and not actually implementing things. And well, I have to confess, and this is something I had spent on my panel. I'm from Donetsk myself, originally from the east of Ukraine, and this issue of national divide, national building, and patriotism is something I also criticize. That like it's not enough to put the Vyshyvanka, traditional Ukrainian, suit on yourself to make yourself Ukrainian. And Ukrainian language is not the only criteria of Ukrainians, and it's really a problem that we. Fully we have to stop blaming somebody actually doing something for ourselves by themselves. I think it's highly important. And from what you said, I think it's really important that we have to tackle and have to come close to the problems of the civil society in this sector as such. Because there's another point to be saying, those who criticize Ukrainian government, Ukrainian civil society are all Putin's agents, which is wrong. You have to criticize, you have to stimulate developments within your own sector, and I think this is something we have also to discuss. Yes. And I support the point that I think we're not even halfway done. We still have a long way to go with this in our panel, but we will not stop there and enjoy the situation as it is. And again, in this issue, I would like to just to underline this how we combine democratization, nation building, because Ukraine receiving this push of patriotism to develop, to form a new civic nation as Ukrainians. Now, from your speech, in order to Irina Sonenko's speech about these topics I've highlighted is really the development of internet media, that like how we get information. I think that the events of this Maidan show how important it is that people have access to information, to internet and to the media to see how things are going and what is going on generally. And then I would also agree with you that we can also talk about how the Orange Revolution provoked this revolution. It was different very much because then the civil society, we knew that we had to do something because we could not rely on the politicians to survive. Yes, I think this is like you also touched on the whole civil society, nation building institutions and so on. And I think it's also interesting that civil society is not now a thing in itself because previously, if you remember, we all had this Soviet tradition. This is the way from the Soviet tradition was we organize a meeting. We see, as you said, like 8 months of discussion, something like that. You invite people from civil organization, they sit, listen to you, you kind of listen to them, and then the government does what they want. Basically, that was the cooperation with the civil society. And also this active citizenry. I agree strongly with you, and tackle this issue, that the citizens become aware of their power, how they can influence, and that actually that they do not need to have organized groups as such to influence. We can get it together, we can put forward initiatives together and use the internet media to position ourselves in the public sphere. So what Jakob Mischke said about this alternative ministries as he started is also an example. We get together and we create our alternative to what is going on. I do remember I posted on Facebook, please, as like association agreement, please associate me with Europe, do not associate myself with Yanukovych regime, as a personal statement. And this is how we did them on this issue of lobbyism, and this is true that we have to rely, we still have to rely on local sources. And I also had this experience with Ukrainians in Berlin because I took the students regularly to German and study trips. And it's interesting that our diplomatic missions were not all that infiltrated by Yanukovych agents, as we speak. So we were really in support of different developments. It's another topic, how the civil society was present abroad and how much of activism was there. I also know it from the Brussels. In Brussels, the Ukrainian diaspora, and the role of diaspora is again another issue. How the Ukrainian who were present abroad influenced the diplomatic information politics. Because you could see on TV one thing going on, but you have local Ukrainians who had relationship with the families and relatives in Ukraine, which information they put forward. But also another, and also Stop Fake is a breeding initiative. A couple of weeks ago, the new Professor Dino was on the panel in Weimar the history, and one of the German students, who came to me and asked for the Stop Fake online site, because she said that it's interesting to know there's a propaganda, there's no propaganda who's dealing with this issue. And now with the very first introduction by the student about the positive aspects and deficiencies. And with these deficiencies, I like this problem of contact between Kyiv and the regions, which is true that in Ukraine sometimes people, especially foreign donors, might come to Kyiv, maybe to Kharkiv or some of the big cities, but Ukraine is a large country. We need to know that we need to have this in mind, that you have to work on the local level, so people have less access to internet, for example. It's basic, things like that. I think it was both mentioned statistical information on the regional level, we can trust the data. In Ukraine, it's interesting, there's not much research, and we can invest in that. And also more awareness about the civil society, because if you travel from like 200 kilometers from Kyiv, people would not be aware of what they could do. They say, but we have nobody who can organize this. And it's again, what Katerina said, there is a problem, we have no management problem in this respect. We have no organized input into non-profit management as such. And exactly, I like that Dr. Stewart mentioned this when asking this question again in the speech. Civil society and the state, should they replace each other by alternative ministries and stuff, and how this could move further. So to sum up the summary, interesting, I would like to say that we're definitely not halfway done. We need to develop further. Now I'd like to open the floor for questions to the panelists, and I think as previously we will gather a couple of questions. So people can ask personally of all the participants, and then we'll provide the answers. So please.
I have a question to Jakob. To what extent the diaspora groups and other, civic activism and necessary Ukrainians in Germany were actually influential, especially influencing policymakers? Because I understand that media field is really now many working different media associations with different, also, political and so on. And I also asked him because I was active in Brussels during the whole Maidan process, and I saw that we were very good at the beginning and kind of organizing big protests, bringing people together. But then when we were thinking, okay, we now have to, to influence the policy, I guess, it was easier for us to do it in the European Parliament because influence people working there. Ukrainian version of France, but it was much more difficult to actually get into Belgian politics and understand what is going on. First, because most of us wouldn't speak neither Flemish nor French very well. We wouldn't follow really their local newspapers, and it's also like very much divided societies where you have basically two different classes. And then we kind of had also to rediscover our relationship with all diaspora, with people who live there, like they were born there, basically. But those people were not necessarily, closely following what is going on in Ukraine. They wouldn't have the same perspective on what is going on there, even not the same interest in a way, Because one thing, if you've been on Maidan, and you have your relative there, another thing, you were just, your grandparents were there, that's it. So I also wonder what kind of, maybe structural factors that you see that weaken diaspora groups in Germany?
Thank you for the long and broad questions. I think I would like us to be precise in the questions so that we could really gather some questions and then have a discussion if possible. Please. My question actually is to Katya's Magi, because I think she's raised a very really good point about the nation building project and democratization and the idea of civil society. Civil society organizations apparently being somehow non-inclusive, the ones that are operating currently, volunteers in the East. I think it'd be interesting to comment, or for you to comment a little bit on this phenomenon that we've seen late over the last 10 years, but really very obvious at this point. It's called the Russian-speaking Ukrainian patriot. And I'm not really sure that I agree with you that the region of eastern Ukraine that has, if you like, co-opted Russian-speaking Ukrainian patriots into a civil society movement has been really not inclusive. I think we perhaps make a little bit too much of the not inclusive elements that are being proposed to us, perhaps by well, to put it in another way, Kremlin propagandists that are trying to paint Ukraine as being somehow not inclusive and somehow right-wing, etc. And the facts just simply don't bear that out. And the fact that we have such a strong movement of Russian-speaking Ukrainian patriots, I think actually proves that we are much more inclusive than the Western media would perhaps like us to, or like us to be. So I guess my question is for you to ask me to expand a little bit of your thoughts on really whether there is a dichotomy between democratization and the real civil society movement that's in East Ukraine. Someone else.
Alexandra Kuchko, Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. Actually, my question is, do you have any, I don't know, fears or presupposition if when this strong civil society can actually prevent the state to become a working democracy, that the very active civil society can be the first stage for the so-called mafia state, and I refer here as well to the article from Encarnacion on the civil society in Brazil, where the strong civil society and the weak state has developed into something that can be called a walking democracy. Thank you. Walking democracy, so active.
I have just one aspect to add to Natalia's question, also to Jakub. Could you please say, if you follow that, how much, to which extent the Ukrainian embassy in Germany was involved in the process of coordination, and maybe just participating in inviting people from Ukraine, explaining what is going on here? And another aspect is whether this movement of activists and writers coming was in a way organized or coordinated, and via which channels?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, friends. My question sort of relates to quite a few of the questions that I've been asked, and some of the sort of self-critical tones about civil society that some of you also have struck. So it's a question also to the Ukrainians on the comment than anything else. What kind of checks and balances are there within Ukrainian civil society? I mean, who sort of puts out into the open if there are organizations that are abusing the name of civil society, that are being opted by a political player, by an oligarch for that matter, if there are organizations that sort of overstep certain sort of ethical boundaries that basically reinforce, let's say, divides between social groups or also ethnic groups in civil society. I mean, who puts this out in the open and addresses it from civil society? What kind of mechanisms are in place that are self-control? And the same goes for many nice to Katja said. Civil society, in a situation like in Ukraine today, tends to take on too much. Too ambitious to pretend it can replace the state. It cannot if it wants to support democracy in this country. So, I mean, who addresses that also from within that civil society? This over-ambition and tries to somewhat more sort of modest and humble tone and sort of constantly reiterates also some of the limits of civil society.
Okay, lots of questions. I'm still a little bit confused about facts and figures. I just want to know, because you're the ones working on this, whether you have any facts and figures on three things. First is, how many do we have? Do we have any numbers? Do we know? I mean, it always depends on definitions. We talk about a surge, but do we know anything about this? Second point, do we know more about how much they are linked to international NGOs? We talked about Transparency International. In terms of expertise, I think this is very crucial, but there's this kind of link, and this is strengthened. And the third one, this specificity of the war effort, which is running in parallel, means that many of the NGOs are mainly dealing with donating for the war effort, trying to do some kind of sponsoring, this is probably what we talked about, especially about the charity organizations, humanitarian organizations. This is a special case. I mean, once the war is over, they will fade away. So this is nothing which is sustainable. So if we do know what kind of percentage, whatever, we don't know percentages probably, but how many of those are just humanitarian, war organized and will fade away? How many of those who really stay and do the advocacy work that is needed for democratization?
I think we can now start